Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody who is joining us from around the world for the August Digital Health Symposium, where we review the latest in evidence and the progress of digital health adoption, not just in North America, but all over the globe. My name is Stan Kishnowski. I'm chair of HITLAB and happy to have everyone here today. Looking forward to a good day of discussion. We have a lot on the agenda, and we are excited to host this program and a bevy of over a dozen speakers and guests and technologies that are advancing the healthcare delivery proposal, as well as the development and distribution of medicines around the world through better use of digital. So we have a good agenda and looking forward to walking through that with you all today. And we're first up on the agenda and first up on the day is going to be just an announcement around Women's Health Tech Initiative and the Women's Health Tech Challenge. We're super excited to let you guys know that the Women's Health Tech Challenge, which is now open for any technologies in women's healthcare that are advancing women's healthcare issues through various digital technologies, is going to be open an additional week from until September 10th. The original close date was September 3rd. We've had such a phenomenal response. We've been asked to hold it open an extra week. So don't forget to put that on your books and get that submitted by then. And we have a tremendous first guest. We're looking forward to talking to Robert Weiner from the Mount Sinai Hospital, one of the top 25 medical facilities, healthcare systems, medical schools in the country. He's a postdoctoral fellow and a scientific lead for the Atomic Force Microscopy Core, and looking forward to talking to him. Robert, great to see you today. Thanks for joining.
Hi, Stan. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So if you could give everyone a little bit of background on yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Mount Sinai Cardiovascular Research Institute and lead scientist of the Atomic Force Microscopy Core at the Icahn School of Medicine. Our lab focuses on cardiovascular disease research, where we use stem cell tissue engineering, devices in robotics, and microscopy to solve cutting-edge problems in cardiovascular disease. And I'm also co-founder of Solaris, which is a medical device company that aims to improve outcomes for minimally invasive surgeries through computer vision systems.
Yeah, it's impressive. That's very impressive. So just based upon how you're using digital in your field and what you've seen in terms of the revolutionary technologies that have come along, talk to us a little bit about some of the emerging trends that you're seeing around the adoption of digital in medical research and diagnostics over the next 5 to 10 years.
Sure. So I think the easiest one that everybody's going to latch on to is generative AI and then the data supporting it. I think there is a lot of hype around it. And I think for good reason that a lot of the technologies that maybe, the timeline is off on, when we're going to really achieve our ultimate goal. But I think the technologies are validated in a lot of the other game-changing products that have already hit the market. For example, ChatGPT from OpenAI and Google DeepMind's AlphaFold. And for those of you who don't know, this is a technology that you can basically input your library or your string of DNA, and it will then predict the geometry or the fold of the protein, which is a big deal because in medicine, a lot of the ways that we leverage different types of medicines and targets is through the geometries of the protein. And it's historically been difficult to both predict this, but be able to quickly get an answer based on the DNA, what kind of structure we're going to get. So I think that's, an obvious answer. I think a really important trend in digital health is this idea of real-time medicine. And so this is through biofeedback systems like the Freestyle Libre, and there was a more commercial one called NutriSense, which I don't know if you've seen folks at the gym. It's basically a sticker that goes on the back of your arm, and it does real-time blood glucose monitoring. Um, this was obviously a game changer for diabetics, where they would have to prick their finger all of the time, measure their blood glucose, and then decide, what it would be they're eating throughout the day, what kind of insulin they had to take. Now this is happening in real time. And I think we see a lot of similar trends from either medicine to more recreational or recreational to medicine, from the Apple Watch and from the Fitbit, where folks are tracking their health and their lifestyle throughout the day, but they're also clear medical technologies that support it, like detecting AFib. And so I think a really important trend going forward is going to be this real-time medicine biofeedback of devices that kind of have been destigmatized for folks that could wear it. But it also kind of feeds back to the doctor, where they can tell you, hey, look, you need to change these things, or even administer medicine in real time.
Yeah, that's super impressive. And then talk a little bit more about some of the successful collaborations that you've seen between diagnostic and digital diagnostics and that kind of field and larger institutions, particularly like the digital startup space and larger institutions, and what kind of successful partnerships have been melded together over the last 5 years. Like you talked about, like with the CGM, the continuous glucose monitor, and the back of people's triceps and things like that. How have larger institutions in the diagnostic space worked with smaller startups?
Yeah, it's a good question. And so I think one of the examples that I can give you is less from the um, immediate diagnostic space and more on the basic translational research side. And so one of the things that we do in lab is cardiovascular disease research. We had recently, or I should say maybe 5 years ago, gotten involved with a space research project where they were trying to use microgravity as a model for accelerated aging. So when astronauts go into space, they experience something like 10 times faster aging in space than they would on Earth. And there was this great study, the Kelly twins, where they had two twins that were astronaut. They sent one up to space, and then one was here on Earth, and they studied both when they got back. But the sample size is small. And so in our mission to use digital health software and basic cardiovascular science to improve diagnostics, one of the things that we want to do is get a better understanding of cardiovascular aging. And so what we did was we teamed up with this company called Space Tango that works with kind of early stage space research groups to send some of our cardiovascular organoids, which are basically just miniature hearts that we make from patients. And we sent them to space. We brought them back down. And then we study and we basically analyze different features of the aging process, but also different, potentially drugs that we could test on them to improve cardiovascular aging. And we're preparing for another launch soon.
That's amazing. That's great. And talk a little bit about more in terms of the experiences that you've seen. How does industry collaboration help advance diagnostics companies and a lot of the, a lot of the translational research that startups and that younger scientists like yourself, emerging scientists are having in the ecosystem? How are those sorts of partnerships advanced and progressed?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that industry partnerships are paramount for research, academic, and for early spinouts. I think one of the things that's important to note is that as a startup, you want to engage with industry. You don't want to try and build everything on your own. And there are experts out there that can help you become strategic partners and ultimately achieve your mission. On the flip side, when I scout potential partnerships at conferences, you want to keep in mind how large the company is. So you want to get an idea of, how they're going to engage with you. But then two, ask the folks there directly. How do they engage with startups? Because oftentimes the process looks like um, an early stage technology will try and partner or collaborate with industry. And they'll go through something called a pilot process, unpaid pilot process, maybe code development, and then a paid pilot. But it's really important throughout that process that while you want to engage with industry, you want to make sure that for lack of a better word, don't get swallowed up, and then you could stay on target with your mission.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And that's great advice. And again, just to end the conversation here, some good advice already to some of these folks that are emerging technologies and emerging researchers. And when you're looking at your experiences and you're looking at other folks around you and in the ecosystem around you, what final piece of advice would you give to emerging technologies, emerging researchers in their work to try to leverage their research and leverage some of their early evidence to help them grow their healthcare innovations?
Yeah, it's a great question. My answer is yes, do it, because it fills a huge gap, and it's a really good way for as scientists and engineers to have impactful work. I would say if you're really early stage and you're still in an institution or academic research institution, start learning about your tech transfer office. Learn about, what pushes their buttons, what gets them excited, how do you kind of engage with them. And then I would say start building a diverse team. So diverse perspectives, leaders, innovators, business folks. And then I think most importantly, that was really helpful to me and going through some of the entrepreneurial programs within the New York ecosystem that gave me, kind of foundational training was stakeholder storytelling. Learn about your ecosystem and all of the decision makers and stakeholders involved, and then figure out how to tell your story. Scientists are not very good at communicating, but through this transition into kind of spin out entrepreneurship, learn about how to do your stakeholder storytelling and get different people from different backgrounds excited about your work.
Phenomenal. Well, look, this is a great interview. Phenomenal lessons learned. Thank you so much, Robert, for joining us today, and looking forward to having you back on the show soon. Take care.
Thanks for having me, Stan.
So again, what a way to kick off the August symposium when we're talking about digital health and we're talking about startups and trying to make sure that folks are getting ahead of the game when it comes to this. Just a lot of valuable experiences and advice from a phenomenal researcher coming out of Mount Sinai. And next up, we've got a host in the first hour. As you guys know, this is a 3-hour program each month, walking through the evidence and the advice here. And so next up, we've got the Breakthrough Alliance's board member and the chair of the Breakthrough Alliance Europe, Laurent Van Leberg. And he's going to be interviewing one of the startups, one of the emerging technologies. They are early revenue. They are scaling quickly and successfully, and being led by a veteran startup specialist, Robert Rodriguez. And really happy to have Laurent and Robert on the program to talk about the significantly adopted and growing quickly platform HITLAB. Laurent, how are you?
You hear me? I'm very good, Stan.
That's fantastic. And Robert, can you hear me as well?
I can hear you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we just need to see your video.
Okay. Well, the machine is asking me to start the video, so hopefully you have the video now.
All right, you guys are good to go. Handing it over to you, Laurent.
Yes, so moving from a clinical trial and diagnostic to actually medical practice. Robert, it's great to have you on these session together.
Thank you very much. Excited to be here.
Maybe we can start actually for those who don't know LXVM well, and they should actually get on the website and know more. Can you basically tell the audience what LXVM activity is about, and maybe a little bit more about your innovative technology?
Okay. What we are is basically a platform, in essence, to that's connecting patients and doctors through what most people would call telemedicine. But we brought a fairly big different wrinkle to it, which is that we're pioneering the use of asynchronous medicine with doctors and patients on the platform. So obviously, most telemedicine is, for the most part, synchronous, right? You get a doctor on the camera, and you get a patient on the camera. Well, our goal is to disassociate those two, so that way both patient and doctor can do their work individually at separate places and separate times, while at the same time being able to deliver what would be a billable medical visit for the patient or for the doctor. And so it's different. The workflows are different. And that's what we've been building now for the past 3 years, in essence, a platform to solve that problem.
And as we think about this asynchronous, let's say health delivery, it sounds obviously feasible, easy, and let's say under control. Maybe today, can you share a little bit about maybe the steps you went through to fine tune and get a working, let's say, a set of activities?
Well, everything is a work in progress. So, but basically, this started with COVID, where we had situations where both patients and doctors didn't want to see each other. Everybody was a little scared. They wanted to sit at home and continue to live their lives, but not in essence exposing each other themselves. So, what started out as in essence a demand and supply problem, in essence, morphed into an opportunity to take advantage of. And it's not necessarily new. The concept of asynchronous medicine is common. It's called sometimes store and forward if you look into the literature. But there's a long way to go, because you have two adoption curves, one for the physician and one for the patient. And so as a result, getting patients accustomed to, in essence, a self-service model, when they're much more accustomed to being essentially babied through a process. And pretty much the same thing for the doctors, right? The doctors are accustomed to many times doing their own observations, their own due diligence on a patient before treating a patient, getting them comfortable with the fact that you don't have to see the patient to do medicine. There is a good adoption challenge on both sides. And the key to working that and making this model work is, in essence, basically education on both sides, but definitely probably more so on the physician side, because it is a very different way of working for them.
And how do you manage, or how do you work on the combination of personalized care while it's asynchronous?
Well, on the patient side, one of the things we obviously do is our self-service platform allows us to do everything from get the patient's name all the way to doing, in essence, triage on the patient. In addition to that, what we do is we bring in third-party data, objective data that exists out there in order to sort of populate a chart, and also populate an administrative chart as well as a medical chart. Being able to get all of that information it's a heavy lift. And then the second part is being able to then synthesize that information for the physician, so that way the activity of the physician is as best as possible an act of reading and analyzing. So that way they're not spending a tremendous amount of time doing data collection, and to some degree simplifying the analysis using AI tools to do decision support for the physician. So there's a heavy element of technology, both in terms of acquiring a lot more data than maybe historically you would be able to collect, and then also synthesizing that data for the physician.
And in this journey, can you maybe share some of the moments or triggers that really accelerated your development and brought you where you are here today?
Yeah, I would say that seeing patients is really what accelerates development, because sitting around on a drawing board, imagining this, or maybe looking at other websites that do similar stuff, or other companies, doesn't quite cut it. The service experience to a patient is what drives us, and what really is acting right now as our innovation engine. So, for example, simple things like, simple things that people kind of take for granted, which is, how do you verify that a patient is a patient and that the information that they're giving you is correct? It's a monumental task. And if you don't do it the right way, financially speaking, you can take tremendous losses as a medical provider. On the flip side, with respect to physicians, not everything the patient tells you is the truth. And at times being able to get objective data from third parties, license holders, in essence, really helps to validate your ability to process that patient and to give service to that patient. So, we've seen, I think, about 50,000 patients over the last 12 months. We're going to continue to grow. And I think that those service experiences in terms of, patients, making sure that we can manage the whole cycle with them, and also giving physicians, in essence, an extract that allows them to read and, in essence, treat without having to do all of the glad handling that typically comes with inpatient, in-office type work.
And do you get actually feedback from patients on not in their visit, but more like on the tool, the software, the technology, and how do you actually integrate it in your improvement development cycle?
Interesting enough, we did a study with HITLAB with respect to the usability of the platform with the patients. And I think that, the feedback from the patients, I think it really does need to be divided into, I think, sort of three pieces. The feedback usually comes in the form of, hey, I don't understand why I need to give you this information. And so that's really more of an administrative task in terms of user feel and making things as easy as possible. So we work on that every day. The second part is, in essence, why am I being asked all of these questions? All I want is X. And so as a result, there's an aspect to, in essence, simplifying triage and constantly focusing on minimizing the baseline questions, as well as also working on the AI in order to make it much more efficient as a decision support tool. And then the last piece is money, because I mean, in the States, there is a significant financial component to every patient you see, and for the physician to get paid. And there's definitely a lot of noise around that, because at the end of the day, I don't think I've ever met a patient who wants to pay for healthcare. And so, but at the end of the day, if they don't pay, the physician's practice certainly struggles a great deal. So working with different, insurance companies, payer arrangements, and patients without insurance, there's a lot of feedback there, and some of it nice, some of it quite nasty, frankly. So they tell you when you don't meet their expectations, and they tell you pretty loud.
And in terms of care, I mean, what segment of care are you covering, and then planning to cover? And can you cover them all, from like day-to-day to emergency, or maybe some more severe specialty care areas?
Yeah, the range of care for the platform, I would say we get three types of patients. The first is what I would call the typical urgent care type patient. I think I have a cold and a flu and I need something. Typically an antibiotic, maybe some pain or a steroid. The second piece are patients who are seeking gap care because they have a prescription that has to be renewed and they can't get in touch with their physician. So those two segments, which are relatively simple medicine, are the biggest sources of patient count for us. And then we do have about 20% of the patients who come in with what I would consider, general medicine. Typically, I don't feel well. I mean, we've seen all types. We've seen patients come in with, belly aches and need to go to the hospital. Patients who, come in who are looking for surgery, and we're not sure how we can help you do that. But there's a wide range of medical seekers who end up in our platform. But most of it is what I would consider low-hanging fruit medicine, which is gap care and typical emergent care, simple emergent care.
And in your development, what are the challenges in terms of scaling up? I mean, you were talking about 55,000 patients, if I'm correct.
Yeah, over 50.
What are the plans and maybe the obstacle or milestone you see as you gotta scale it up?
Well, we've made every mistake. We've banged our heads against the wall, which is kind of how we learn. We learn through making mistakes. But I would say, our scaling imperatives first and foremost is that we've got to migrate our technology platform to sort of a full cloud architecture in order to meet patient expectations on latency related issues. That's part one. The second part two, is we have to get more sophisticated in terms of the triage. So that way we don't spend as much time with the patient asking necessarily unnecessary questions, but only ask the ones that are most relevant to their condition. So imagine, that you have 15 common conditions, with potentially 250, 300 different outcomes, and you have to be able to sort of model all that. So we've started that process. And I think that those two things are probably the most important in terms of scaling, in terms of customer acquisition and retention. I think that the latter part of it is just making sure, because physicians are still involved in the process, that we are building a physician team that understands where we're going and what we're trying to do, which is we're trying to change your workflow to be, instead of 100%, face-to-face medical encounters, to maybe something along the lines of 70% asynchronous, 30% face-to-face. And clearly that would change by different specialties. I think, the more complicated specialties, allergy, immunology, et cetera, obviously it's a little bit more complicated, but, we're definitely for, primary care, urgent care, family practice type stuff. I think we have a pretty robust solution that we have and we're building further.
In terms of geographical focus, I mean, is it a solution that can expand US wise and maybe even internationally? Or because of some of the elements you mentioned, it's more like state-wise or
Well,
more limited geography?
Yeah, the application right now, I mean, we're a consumer adjacent platform. I mean, everything is about the consumer and the doctor. Okay, so we're not just a pure let's do something more efficient for a physician's practice. So and the U.S. service experience is a little different for a consumer than it is in other countries. So we've started with the U.S. consumer service experience, pretty much focused on the U.S. market at this moment in time. We do think that in the future, as we develop the platform and some of the microservices that are inside the platform, that there is an ability to cherry pick some of the services, particularly in the area of physician workflow and the integration of asynchronous medicine into a practice that can be, in essence, licensed on an international basis. But we got to start small and work our way big. So, and sick people are sick people, and we have plenty of them here in the United States. So we got to start.
Yeah, it's super interesting, Robert. But maybe as a word of conclusion in the last minute, any word of advice for people here listening to us? Probably not to set up a similar company, because obviously you don't want to multiply a competitor, but as they set up their digital health solution, advise on getting on the journey like you.
Well, I could be a little biased here, but I'm a very strong believer in, at least for US based solution, that you want to have people who understand the US healthcare system. I mean, you can have the most brilliant technical mind, but if you don't understand the culture of how medicine is delivered in this country, if you don't understand the legal issues, I think that you're liable to work on something really cool that doesn't quite fit the profile. So I believe that experience in working with your customers, very closely with your customers, and taking all the lumps that comes with it, I think is super critical in order to even have a chance of getting out of a startup mode.
Super. Thanks a lot, Robert. And for those listening here, please connect on LinkedIn with both of us. Follow up with any question. Obviously, we're available. Looking forward to continue the dialogue. Up to you, Stan.
That's fantastic, Laurent. Thank you. And Robert, one question for you before you sign off. I just wanted to know, again, into the audience here today, this is one of the organizations, this is one of the technologies that the lab has identified through multiple studies as very adoptive and adopting quickly. And Robert, if there is a person or people in the audience who would be your best customers, who would those people include? What organizations would they be from?
Well, I mean, there are a few verticals that we're focused on today. I think the first is, I mean, obviously we're going direct to consumer, but to me, a provider organization who's looking for like an ED diversion program where they're trying to get simple medicine out of their emergency room, which clutters them. And they can continue to still bill the patient, but we would in essence provide the platform to process and diagnose and do all that work. So I think ED diversion, and I also think that on the pharmaceutical side, the folks who are looking to go direct would benefit with a consumer-oriented solution that helps link the authorization process to the patients that they're marketing. I mean, I can't believe the billions of dollars that are spent on advertising, and they don't know where those customers are going. I mean, you might get interest and the customer goes to a doctor and they go somewhere else. So in terms of what they're buying. So I think linking consumer marketing efforts to actual authorizations and real patients that can be funneled into the distribution network that they have, which are professional distribution networks, obviously.
It's fantastic. Well, thank you again for joining today. And, you know, again, in the audience, if you're with a hospital system or anyone like that, or, you know, a number of other pharmacies or independent clinics, things like that, where you can use asynchronous medicine as a way to help take care of your patients at times a day when you're not able to, then if you're an investor, one of those groups, get in touch with Robert right away. His LinkedIn is in the chat box, and certainly what from the HITLAB's point of view and what we're studying and what we're seeing in terms of digital adoption in this new post-pandemic age of adoption, it's asymmetrical. So it's very important that everyone understands that, whether they're investors, whether they're buying digital technologies, that they understand that the adoption that everyone was anticipating during the pandemic, where everyone thought Teladoc was going to be $1 million stock and everyone thought that there was going to be virtual HMOs all over the world, that's changed. So we're seeing a different type of adoption in digital in healthcare delivery, and we're seeing a very different type of adoption in digital in supply chain. So it's important that people are taking note of our research here, because if they're investing in things that were paradigms of 2021 and 2022, then they need to shift things immediately. And if they're looking at paradigms that were either health plan, provider, pharma, then they need to rethink that. Look at the Lilly launch that you saw in January of this year for Lilly Direct, and then look at their earnings report that came out 2 weeks ago, where they had some of the best earnings in the history of the company, and the stock's near $1,000 a share. So direct to consumer through manufacturer is one of those areas that are spiking in ways that no one anticipated 2 years ago. So again, asymmetrical adoption is what we need to look for when it comes to digital. And that means if you listen to folks like Lee Shapiro, the managing partner and founder of 7Wire and Transcarent, listen to what he says in a lot of my lectures and other programs here, that digital startups, including Livongo, which pivoted 3 times before it actually saw some scaling, requires a pivot. So the art of the pivot is the key for digital. Again, and if anyone in the audience here today has any ideas for any kind of technologies that you want us to feature here, or studies or publications that we should feature here, I just put my LinkedIn into the chat box. Please link in with me and message me, and let's talk about that, because we're learning a lot of new things, not only from our own research on platforms like Helix VM, but also on platforms like, and also just from listening and talking to people like yourselves. All right. And speaking of talking to people, we are excited to have another announcement about another challenge we're doing this semester. Lots of challenges coming along this semester for the Breakthrough Alliance, which is our program that Laurent is board chair of in Europe. And it's our collaboration with certainly Merck and the Merck Global Fund and New York City Economic Development Corporation, and numerous other groups. And this one's being sponsored by Mercury, a phenomenal partner. Take a look at Mercury, as well as Ballas Invest, which is Laurent's investment fund. And we're excited to take a look at that and make sure your company is entering that. That is wide open. Any size, pre-commercial, early commercial, late commercial, can apply for the Breakthrough Alliance Challenge. And we're looking forward to seeing you there. Just scan that code and jump in there. And up next, we are really excited to have our own Jerry Antamano, who's a senior manager at the lab in community development, talking to an executive from Novo Nordisk about global innovation in medical devices. Jerry, handing it over to you.
No, thanks very much, Stan. Really awesome open to the August Symposium for today. And who better to talk to about global innovation and medical devices than Andrew Gosdanovich, International Medical Manager at one of the leading life science companies in the world. Andrew, pleasure to have you on the program. Thanks so much for coming on. For those in the community that don't know you very well, we'd love to get a quick 30-second background on what you're currently doing at Novo Nordisk.
Hey, yeah, great pronunciation of my second name as well. You didn't even stumble. Yeah, so I'm Andrew. I joined Novo Nordisk just under 6 months ago now. I sit within something that's quite unique to them, which is medical and sciences. So it's predominantly clinicians that work across development, from early development all the way to kind of later development. And I specifically sit in a group called Devices and Digital Health, where we do everything from trial design all the way through to kind of clinical evaluation. And by background, I've worked in strategy and design for multimodal data analytics platforms. I've worked as product in digital health and across clinical regulatory and startups. So it's great to be here.
No, wonderful to have you on. We should get right into it because I know we only have a limited time and there's definitely a lot we want to cover. But I think what we should start off is getting your insights around key trends, especially around sort of global innovation and what's shaping that at the moment in terms of medical devices and digital health. And for the startups on the program today, I'm sure they'd love to hear about how they can adapt to those trends to continue to stay competitive.
Yes, I think there's a whole load of trends going on at the moment, and Stan's already alluded to one of them. And it's that kind of health democratization. And I think part of that comes from, the lagging effect of the burden on the healthcare systems. But, if we kind of talk initially around democratization from the pharma perspective, as he's already mentioned, we've had Lilly Direct at the start of the year, kind of a direct-to-consumer platform. Pfizer's followed suit, I think just this week with their Pfizer for All. And so what we're now seeing is that bigger players, as well as some of the smaller players, are kind of realizing that there's opportunity to be had by going directly to people who care more about their health now. And I think part of that is because of the lagging effect of reimbursement, although we have seen some good movements there too. But, we're seeing great success from small players such as, well, not so small now, but Noom, who kind of do the health and fitness and diet tracking, who've gone D2C, even people like Nintendo. I'll have a foot in the game now with Pokemon Sleep, which has been a great success. And it's not just in digital health, we're seeing that in devices too, with both Abbott and Dexcom both getting kind of a D2C CGM approved this year too. And I think that this kind of goes hand in hand with, this moving away from living just from kind of longevity health and more into a view around healthy aging. So people are really taking much more interest in terms of how can we live not just longer, but better. And that kind of flows into another one of those trends, which has been here for a while, but is kind of now getting a little bit stronger, which is those around wearables. And we're seeing that not only in the consumer space, but also, again, in much more regulated spaces too. So big players such as Apple and Samsung have both had great moves this year as well, with the Apple Watch getting AFib burden approved by the FDA, and the Samsung Galaxy Watch getting de novo authorization for sleep apnea. So again, I think we're seeing some really great moves there too. And I mean, just broadly across the industry, I think digital health and medtech, there are some really cool trends going on across femtech. You can't move without running into AI, and in particular large language models at the moment, and things such as surgical robotics, which Neuralink is all over the news too. So I think there's some really big trends, but they're all kind of underpinned by democratization of health and people wanting to live better.
Yeah, you definitely mentioned a lot of key trends that are happening right now that I think a lot of the startups are keeping track of. I know we had some advice given from one of the executives from Mount Sinai earlier, a major health system, of course, within the US. From the life sciences point of view, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs right now who are looking to disrupt sort of the traditional medical device markets at the moment, or digital health landscapes?
Yeah, I think in terms of staying competitive, it's it's remembering that trends are trends. So, when we talk about AI, the AI is not the product. The product should be fixing something. It should be, answering an unmet need. So you should be, trends are by means transient. So if your entire product or business is a trend, then it is transient by nature. And so I think the key is to try and identify a problem and apply, the trend almost to it, if you see what I mean. So, I mean, if you look at, there's a company called Scala in the UK who identified that medical regulation's hard. People have problems with it. So they brought a technology solution to that problem. But they didn't just bring the technology, they brought around all the wraparound services you need to make that successful. And, by doing that, they really cement themselves in the market and give themselves a much better chance to be successful when, the hype around something goes away. I think that's really important.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely key, I think. And there's often the need for sort of startups to consider, a lot of different things when they are either starting out or they're in their growth stages. How can they sort of balance that need for the innovation piece of their business and their technologies compared with the sort of the rigorous sort of regulations and safety standards that are required right now in the medical device industry as you see it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question because, clinical safety and regulation, those standards are there for a reason. And, sometimes they are overbearing, sometimes they slow things down. I think the key is to innovate freely in a sandbox environment at the start, make your mistakes, talk through your ideas with stakeholders, have that ideas box and keep those regulations and standards in mind so that when you go to that next step around how do we, design this, what does that roadmap look like? Those steps and those things are still there. So it's almost built in by design, because otherwise what you'll have is, fine, you'll advance really quickly to begin with. And then when it comes to crunch time, you're unsuccessful because one, no one's going to buy you because you're not fit for purpose.
Mhm.
And two, you don't have any of the evidence to demonstrate that you're any good. And so I think it's really around, yes, it is maybe slower in the long run, but it's really the key to success if you're looking to be a long-term player.
Yeah, I mean, always easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
In terms of putting it into actual practice and stuff. I know we only have about a minute left, and I really wanted to ask you this specific question on, the list of questions that we could go through. But, AI is a really big thing at the moment, of course, across all sectors. And we'd love to get your insights on how you'll foresee the integration of AI and machine learning, evolving in sort of the medical device space and the digital health sectors at the moment.
Yeah, again, I think that the question's so linked to the previous one, which is that there's a lot of potential, there's a lot of hype. We have to learn from the mistakes of the digital health boom and bust, which is not bust, but the kind of burst over the last couple of years in terms of investment, where people really want to see that there's a long-term plan. What's the market fit? What's the unmet need? What's the route to success? And actually, bringing in some revenue, making a return, because it's not enough just to bang in, AI here and AI there. It'll be the same as digital health again, where, we're looking a few years down the line and you have big, some of the leading players at the time, like Babylon, who, disappear. And so I think it's be smart, don't make it, your only answer. Make it a solution, think about the long-term integration. It's all planning.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. That's actually, I think, really sound advice in any capacity for all the folks that are listening in the program. Andrew, I'm sorry you've run out of time. I know we had lots more to get through. I definitely welcome you to answer some of the questions that popped up in the chat after you've hopped off this segment. But really appreciate you coming on and taking the time to share your insights with us. And always a pleasure to have a fellow Brit on the program as always. Back to you, sir.
Nice to speak.
Outstanding interview. And Andrew, again, thank you for the tremendous insights. And just for the HITLAB audience, it's just fantastic to see these insights coming from every different part of the stakeholder system, whether it's a top 25 academic medical center, or whether it's a digital health startup, whether it's a venture fund, or a manufacturer, health plans, et cetera. So that's a big part of what we're trying to do with our programming, is to make sure that you all are getting perspectives from across the ecosystem. A nice special that the Breakthrough Alliance team set up today, and it's again ending through August 31st, but it is primarily open for the HITLAB community, and that is this idea of the Breakthrough Alliance memberships, whether you want to be a general member or you want to be a global member or a board member. Let us know. Just use that code there and sign up, and it would be great to have you become a member of over 500 people globally that get together once a week on a number of different levels, whether it's a convene, reception, networking receptions. We do things in person, we do things virtually. We discussed a lot about what AI is doing, what the asymmetrical adoption of digital is doing, and you can learn about this stuff because we're talking about it all the time and really trying to be transparent about it as well. So hopefully you can join. We'd love to see you online tomorrow, next week, next month. Fantastic. And so we are still rounding out our first hour here, and really excited about our next guest, who is a New York City native and someone who's put together a startup in New York City now, and doing just a great job in helping transform how labs are managed using digital technologies, which is another big way of being able to improve patient healthcare, is by getting the laboratories on a more efficient and a more systematic and more structured way of operating through digital. And really happy to have Unica Alexander from Proficient Lab. Unica, how you doing? You are on mute. And just for our audience, if you could, for folks, again, remember you can hit her LinkedIn in the chat box that Sammy's popping in there. And you can also connect with her on LinkedIn to learn more about her company if you are in the market for a lab system, or you are looking to be an investor, either angel or otherwise, into a lab system in New York City. But Unica, if you could give the audience a little bit of background on yourself and your journey, and then also Proficient Lab.
Absolutely. So I'm so happy to be here today. Thank you so much for having me. So I am the co-founder and CEO at the Proficient Lab. I've been in the laboratory industry for about 14 years right now. And what I've really been doing before I've been an entrepreneur is building labs and optimizing operations. And as I've optimized operations, I've seen that we have a population in the US that's running about 14 billion tests every year. And these tests must be performed with precision and accuracy. And what we're finding is that the processes to ensure that accuracy and precision and quality and safety is achieved is lacking. So that's where we come in. We create processes that are repeatable and scalable. And that is the objective of the Proficient Lab and what we're going to talk about today.
That's just fantastic, and certainly much needed as well. As a matter of fact, I was just talking to Michael Norson from Columbia Launch Labs, and he wants to meet you. So look for an invite coming forward on that one to help them out. They've got a bunch of startups that all are lab-based and could certainly use some more software to help that out. And again, you mentioned that repeatable and scalable. That's so absolutely spot on. And talk a little bit more about that, because you've obviously identified some pretty big challenges in the lab industry. So talk about the specific challenges you've seen in lab training and retention, knowledge retention, and how your platform addresses that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we find is that as labs need to repeat processes between different people and through different branches that particular organization may have for laboratories, there's usually a disconnect between how individuals get from A to Z. And what you find is that you have subject matter experts who say, okay, I'm making the rules, this is how something's supposed to go. But as that gets diluted through different managers or supervisors, the objective of how these processes are supposed to flow starts changing. And that is what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to ensure that as you have a process that's outlined, whether it's for quality or for the compliance aspect of the laboratory, as these things are outlined by the subject matter expert, that can be scaled 1,000 times. through 1,000 people, 1,000 laboratories, and still maintain the integrity of what the original intention was. And that is what we're doing in terms of repeatability. We're really breaking these processes down into bite-sized pieces of information. So it's instructional and anyone could basically pick up and get it done the right way. So that's the repeatable aspect of it. And in terms of scalability, we're really looking to, one of our objectives at this point is to help standardize the industry. I've been in the industry for quite a while, and we talk a lot about there's no standardization in the industry. Well, no one's really trying to ensure that there is a quality management system that could be standardized throughout not just a laboratory, but throughout several organizations all at once. And that's something that we're really focused on in making happen.
It's fantastic. And let's pick up that thread for a minute and talk more about what your version and what your vision of the industry looks like and how you're going to be able to help the industry grow over the next 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So the industry is quite disjointed. And there really isn't communication between, I would say, different organizations in an industry. So there may be a particular manufacturer of an instrument, or there may be, 1,000 labs performing one process, but the way at which the results are achieved may be different. And what we're trying to do is say, hey, we understand that this is the best practice for this particular test, for this particular method. How can we have a community share that information? How can we have the laboratory space at large share that communication, independent of organization, independent of laboratory? How do we disseminate that? And that is what we are trying to achieve.
That's exactly right. And talk a little bit more about partnerships. We've talked about that a few times already this morning. And if you could, talk about some of the partnerships and collaborations that are crucial to the development of your success and your platform, and how some of our community, whether they're investors or whether they're lab managers or whatnot, or developing molecules and they need a lab system, how are they working with you to really create success?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have actually, we're working with larger organizations as well as startups. And I will say that for the startups, one of the problems we're able to solve for them, and that makes our partnership so great for them, is that they usually have a really good life science idea, which involves the laboratory space. But in terms of the compliance aspect of running a laboratory, of the operational aspect of it, there's usually not a good grasp on that. And what our system does is that it takes the expert and the novice through to the appropriate compliance endpoint. And that way it gives them a foot to stand on in terms of saying, this is what we're doing, this is compliant, this is going to get us to the quality that we need. In terms of the larger organizations that we've partnered with, they're able to really scale their processes. So for instance, we have a partner who has about 80 laboratories around the country. And before we came on board, it was extremely difficult for them to have a small quality department managing a large number of people around the country. And because our system is so centralized in terms of what the standards are and how that's disseminated multiple times, that small department is now able to oversee quite a number of individuals around the country, which makes it extremely time-saving and cost-effective for them.
That's fantastic. Well, this is great. And just we have about a minute left. Any words of advice for startups that are following in your footsteps, especially New York City startups that are following your footsteps?
Absolutely. I would say just just know your space. I know someone said that before, but I have definitely been on the receiving end of someone, an IT company building in the laboratory space, who really does not understand the workflow of a laboratory. It's quite complicated. There's so many nuances into getting from A to Z. So understand your space, understand what the problem is, and build a network within that space. That is my advice.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Inika. And again, if anyone in the audience is an investor or a lab manager or managing a molecule development, definitely get in touch with her. Again, this is a revenue plus company, early launch, doing really well, scaling fast. So keep your hat on, everybody. We're going to be following her, and this is a HITLAB tested company as well. So HITLAB has validated the technology and verified the platform. So it is a 100% green light, ready for takeoff.
Yeah.
Thanks, Inika. Take care. And speaking of taking off, we've got a new thing that we're doing with the symposium. And this is a shout out to our audience. You guys are awesome. And we are offering a 1-year Breakthrough One general membership that's valued at about $100 and a ticket to the fall summit at the Microsoft Tech Center in Times Square, December 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, with hundreds of people, VIPs from around the world, investors, buyers, startups, academics, government executives coming in, and that's valued at $5,000. So now the next slide is going to reveal a code, and some lucky audience member is going to win these two things. So if you can, go ahead and click on that link that Sammy just popped into the chat box. And when you pop into that link and fill it out with your information and you enter in that code August, you are good to go for being entered into this very cool contest that has just been started up this month in August. So good luck to everybody entering that, and we hope to see you soon. Next up, we've got our own Jerry Antamano again, our Senior Community Development Manager at the lab, going to talk to Ben Kromnick, and he is an executive from Mercury, which is a disruptive health tech, fintech company, and absolutely taking the world by storm. Jerry, handing the mic over to you.
Yeah, cheers, Dan. It's a pleasure to welcome Ben Kromnick onto the program today, one of our partners for the Breakthrough Alliance Challenge that's taking place at the end of the year. So do please check that out. And if you are a startup, we do encourage you to apply to that. Ben, pleasure to have you on the program. We've got a lot to get through, but for those in the community that don't know who you are and what Mercury is doing right now, we'd love you to give us a quick 60-second background on yourself and the good work that Mercury is doing right now for startups.
Sure. Great to be here, Jerry. So Mercury is a banking platform that supports entrepreneurs and founders from date of ideation, date of incorporation. We want to be the first bank account that you open, all the way up through massive scale. And I lead our healthcare and life sciences practice, where I have like the best job in the world. I get to spend every single day taking my all of the scars, all of the experiences that I've had as a founder, primarily building clinical research informatics platforms, and my background as an investor, working with founders every single day, both in our book of business, our clients, we work with them deeply to help them build those strategies up so they can continue to grow, continue to scale, continue to get that next contract at that academic medical center, or get to the next stage with the FDA. But I get to do that from my background, and I get to take the experience I've had as a founder, and I get to use that and deploy that every day, both for our book and for our customers, but also for the ecosystem at large, as we sort of serve as a connective tissue across entrepreneurship ecosystems all over the country.
No, that's awesome. Thanks for coming on and sharing your insights, Ben. And with your vast experience that you've had in the past and what you're doing now with Mercury, we'd love to hear about your vision for the future of healthcare and life sciences, being that you're leading that particular arm at Mercury, and what you see sort of coming up in the next sort of 5-10 years, and of course, where startups are going to play that role in that future. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I will not pretend to be able to forecast where healthcare will be in 5 or 10 years. No matter how slow we think this industry moves, yet it's completely different every decade. But I want to talk about 3 kind of macro trends that I'm observing. One, I think, is really fascinating, which is hospital systems, academic medical centers becoming both consumer brands and technology companies and data companies. Specifically looking at some of the amazing work that Mayo has been doing as I would say a leader, sort of a flagship for how we can create a consumer brand. Everybody knows Mayo is the place to go to get the best care in the world. But they also have 14 venture funds. And they also have a groundbreaking data platform. And not only is it a data platform, they have an ecosystem that enables startups to access that data, actually develop IP on that data, and then spin out. And they have a really predictable licensing model for that. As we all know, working with academic medical centers, universities, licensing models are never predictable. They're never clear cut. Mayo has made that much more efficient, and they are probably the most organized in this. But there are probably 5 or 10 brand name academic medical center, hospital systems that are developing right along that path. So I think that what will be different in 5 or 10 years is the intersection of the academic medical center and the hospital system with the technology industry and with the directly at the consumer. I think it will change both how new healthcare paradigms are developed. I think it will also change how consumers conceive of the care that they're receiving. I mean, that's one kind of big macro trend that we're seeing change. The second, I think, is the role of startups, right? So the pace of innovation in healthcare is accelerating. And it's sort of these two trends are complementary, right? As academic medical centers and hospital systems get better about working with the innovation ecosystem, it has a knock-on effect where we're releasing all of this additional capacity of innovation that has lived in startup land for so long and has been stifled by, frankly, very, very old technology systems, very, very old executive systems. Literally, the decision-making frameworks of hospital systems just don't work with, well, let's try this methodology and see how it goes, and we'll iterate to something different. That doesn't work in a hospital system. I was talking to a hospital executive 2 weeks ago, and we talked about how if you bring a pre-validated company into her system, she will just say no. It's like, if you've never integrated with Epic before and you do not have your clinical data for your digital health company or your therapeutic or your device or your workflow company, she's just going to say no. But then the next sentence was, oh, but we support all of our researchers working directly with startups to develop exactly those things. So you just have to know the right front door. And that has been so confused and so unclear for so long. We're starting to see that really change. And I think that startups are going to find much, much more traction much earlier with much better defined ecosystems that live around the patient. I think that's the second one. I think the pace of innovation is going to increase.
You're getting a lot of agreement, I think, in the chat and the reactions there as well.
I'm hopeful, and if you are a startup and you want to know more about how to talk to these AMCs, hit me up on LinkedIn or find me through HITLAB. Would love to share which ones are doing a great job. The last trend I want to talk about is super boring, and it's the most important thing in healthcare, which is Medicare. So I was with one of our a congressman yesterday, and he's on the Ways and Means Committee. He's talking about how there was a fiscal policy subcommittee that was defined about 3 years ago, bipartisan committee in the Ways and Means Committee, with the primary focus. It's not in any of their documentation that's their primary focus, but it really is their primary focus, to solve for Medicare in 8 years, because we're in trouble. Like, Medicare is not in a good place. And if we do not change something, we will have to start reducing benefits in 8 to 10 years. And that will dramatically change what healthcare looks like. That change will start sooner, right? We'll start to anticipate this in 5 years. We'll start to do the political prognosticating to try to figure out which way we'll go. And what happens with Medicare will be one of the defining trends in the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, no, I think some really important facts and some scary facts, I think, and insights from you, Ben. I know we're sort of coming up with time, and there's always, you definitely filled up a huge amount of time just with that first part there. No, it's great, and we're definitely getting a lot of interaction in the chat and the emojis and stuff. But I'd love to sort of get a quick wrap with you. We're definitely obviously going to have you back in the program again. But in your experience, and specifically around sort of the breakthrough challenge that Mercury is helping to support this year, what criteria and qualities do you think are going to be crucial for startups to stand out and succeed, not just in this specific challenge, but I know you've been involved in other challenges and competitions before, and I'm sure that the startups and founders on this program would love to hear your insights around sort of those qualities and criteria that you think they need to stand out.
Yeah, I'll try to be quick. I have 2 points when it comes to pitching any kind of company, but especially healthcare companies. First is make it a story. We all have clinical data. And so, like, I was at a pitch the other day. I'm going to make this long. There were these incredibly detailed data visualizations about the effectiveness of this device. No one could read it. That's not why we're there. Take that data and make it a story. Tell me why your device is cheaper, faster, more effective. Make it about the humans that are going to participate in this. We're all here because we care about human beings fundamentally. Like, no one works in healthcare for fun. Like this is hard. We do it because we care about people. The second component is what I call super alignment, which I think the gentleman from, I think it was Novo Nordisk, was talking about, that like, if you do not have a vision for how your company exits, how you get paid long term in a sustainable fashion, and how you fit in the system overall, you're not going to work. It can't, like, this isn't SaaS where you can be like, oh, I started out with like teachers who are left-footed, and then I went to teachers that were right-footed, and I figured like left-handedness was also good, and I can like keep kind of iterating and pivoting around. That doesn't work in healthcare. You have to have super alignment from day one. And if you can tell that story from the beginning of, this is where we're going to be in 5 years, and these are the blocks we're going to have to knock down to get there, as an investor, as a sponsor, as someone who's here with the community, do the extra work to think about it and put it in a slide. So that's it. I'm going to stop there.
No, that's brilliant. I'm sure you had a lot more to say there. But Ben, thanks so much for coming on the program. I'm sorry we don't have more time to spend with you. Definitely stick around, answer some questions in the chat. And of course, we'll have you back on the program again. And pleasure having you on to share your insights.
Great. Thanks, everybody. I'll drop my info in the chat too.
Cheers, Ben. Thanks so much. And to answer some of the questions in the chat, this is going to be recorded, so it will be on our YouTube channel. So do check it out a couple of days after the symposium today, and we should have some of the sessions on there over this weekend. Stan, back to you.
That's fantastic, Joey. Great interview too, and so much learning and so much to learn from Ben and the team from Mercury there. That's phenomenal. So do reach out to Ben and Mercury and find out how they can help you. Again, a nice, very nice product for startups. And again, seeing massive diffusion and adoption of what they're doing as well. And speaking of adoption, one of the other products that and platforms that we've been testing recently is Actual Health Services, and on board now and here to talk about what they're seeing in the connectivity world between practices, whether it's primary and specialty or specialist specialty or all of the above to patient, is the CEO and founder and board chairman, Dr. Jamie Wisser, and his partner here, Robert Holton, who's president COO. And we're going to talk a little bit about this for the next few minutes, everyone. And it's important to hear, again, like we talked about earlier, the adoption of digital is asymmetrical in what we're seeing in the ecosystem today. And this is one of the platforms that the lab has studied that's seeing a nice uptake and significant adoption. So let's start off. Gentlemen, welcome to the program today.
Hey, Stan, how's it going?
Hey, Stan, how are you?
Going well. It's going well. And looking forward to talking here because you guys have a lot of incredible insights to add to the equation. So let's start with this. How are you envisioning this role of innovation when it comes to transforming public health services at the national level? Like we just heard Ben talking about Medicare, and what are you seeing in terms of your platform and public health services?
I guess I'll start. One of the things that has been so important in the innovation of our technology has been the idea of how can we make the technology be available to the average individual, primary care doctors, specialty physicians, and hospital systems to make the sort of the exchange of patient care, what we call the referral network, seamless, right? So you know, in our last fireside chat, if you break it down into what we described as being the critical element of the healthcare system, it was ultimately the patient-doctor, relationship. So how does that patient-doctor relationship get refined? Right now, we use faxes, phone machines. We use, people we're familiar with to call and contact to refer patients for specialty treatment. But there has to be a system that can be more standardized, I think, to the last speaker's point. We need something that is uniform. We need something that's predictable. We need something that speeds, access to definitive care, is a good matching system for patients and doctors. The doctors can provide the best care for that type of patient, where the doctor and the patient and the primary care doctor are in a triangle, and they're all working together in that referral process. So the actual delivery of the care is definitive, when the presentation of the patient, the in-person part of it, has been sort of screened and programmatically made easier and faster and more efficient by technology, which is kind of where we've really sort of said is our beachhead, it's our focus. And in all honesty, there really isn't any other system out there that we've been able to come across that is focusing on this particular element. And so that's where we think it's important. And from, the who's going to pay for it and how's it going to have a long-term revenue source. Ultimately, the hospital systems and the doctors' practices, they're all looking for, younger patients who are easier to take care of. They have the best payer mix. They have the decision-making for their children. They have the decision-making for their dependent adults. They are the group that's the largest population in the country right now. And everyone is competing for them through advertising, through, outreach, programmatic approaches, whether it's online or whether it's in-person symposia. But the punchline is that everybody wants these patients. And those who subscribe to our technology are going to have a new methodology by which to attract these patients and be able to increase that population, which ultimately is the future Medicare population. And they're literally planning not only for the present, but they're also planning for the future.
That's great. And again, I think it's important that the audience realizes that Dr. Wisser is not just a founder and the CEO and the board chairman of this company, but he's also a practicing physician. So you can see he's actually in his smocks right now and just probably in between surgeries or whatever.
And, literally in between operations.
And Rob, again, you're doing great work here. You're a veteran of multiple startups and exits. You know what you're doing. And talk a little bit about some of the value creation and some of the work that you've seen already with AHS that exemplifies how the company is pioneering this kind of new solution in public health.
Yeah, absolutely, Stan. And I just want to take a second. Kudos to Ben before us. A powerful speaker. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And unfortunately, we had to follow him. So great job, Ben. Great information. Just real quick to kind of follow on what Jamie was saying on a bigger picture, I think, one of the keys here, from driving, improved healthcare outcomes, one of the kind of the easier ways to do it, or important ways to do it, really is improving care collaboration, right? Everybody knows, the more we can collaborate from provider to provider, whether it's physician to physician, physician to specialist, right? We have definitive improved healthcare outcomes from that. And really, this platform specifically allows us to address those types of issues. Whether you're talking about, internal collaboration from within the healthcare system, or if you're talking about larger healthcare systems that are dealing with fragmentation issues, right? A system like AHS can play a critical role in that kind of care collaboration. And then also, as Jamie was pointing out, from a new patient acquisition standpoint, or really it's the way we look at it, more democratization of the access outside of your healthcare system, right? Being able to transition effective referral, search, find, and refer, but also be able to smooth that transition, right? And track that transition throughout the referral process. Are they, getting the appointment scheduled? Is the appointment happening? Are we getting speed to definitive care? And are we filling in all of the gaps along the way, from a medical record standpoint, testing and imaging, from a HIPAA compliance standpoint? I mean, really, that becomes the critical nature of how do we solve that care collaboration when providers aren't in the same office, aren't in the same city.
Yeah, that's an enormous challenge. And it's very clear that the public health system is really having an issue in putting that together. We've got about 5 minutes left, and I think, we really want to touch on a number of other areas, but one of the things we want to talk about is, when you look, Jamie, when you're looking at the ecosystem and you're looking at this kind of opportunity, who are some of the groups, whether it's clinics or whether it's health systems or hospitals, who are you trying to collaborate with across the ecosystem to better deploy what you guys have invented and what you're scaling, and how you can help patients that they have receive better care because of the platform's features and functions?
We're focusing on specialists. Specialists make up a significant portion of the healthcare, provisionary sector. There are quite a number of primary care physicians, but the specialists tend to be sort of the definitive interventionalists, those who are referred to for, access to definitive decision-making, definitive execution. And so by focusing on the specialists, we're kind of doing this differently than anybody else who's working in the patient acquisition sector. Most focus on primary care, most focus on patients being able to schedule, appointments on an open platform. The specialists have an opportunity. We're sort of balancing the playing field. They have an opportunity to select their patients. They have an opportunity to decide who they're good for to help when the referrals come. And I think the other important and critical element to the platform, which is so important, is that whether a patient initiates an inquiry or a primary care doctor or even a community specialist needing academic assistance and coaching initiates the inquiry for a referral, the system is built to close the loop. So the information is AI assisted for generating the documentation. The availability of the documentation is reviewed by the doctor, is signed off, and then it's shared with the referring primary care doctor. So that closed loop, keeping everybody in the game, keeping everybody knowledgeable, can bring the quickness and the efficiency of the care to a new level that is just, it's unprecedented. And the fact that the platform does that itself is paramount, and makes it easy for those who are using it, both patients or doctors on behalf of the patients, because many patients are not necessarily technologically savvy.
That's absolutely spot on. And we've seen there's such a socio-demographic difference and such a socio-technical difference across the demographics that it's very difficult to have one technology work for much more than maybe even a plurality of a patient population. So you're absolutely right that really having a platform that's going to be able to work with 95% of the patient population is a major challenge. And let's build off of that, Rob. Again, we've got about a minute left here, but from your perspective, when you look at all the different types of trends and technologies that are shaping this kind of healthcare delivery in the future, what is AHS doing to help, like Jamie was saying, the clinics and the patients better prepare for this and be prepared for all these, even what Ben was saying, just the tremendous differences that we're going to see in healthcare delivery over the next 10 years. What is AHS doing in that realm to help clinics and physicians be more competitive and help patients get the best care possible?
Yeah, I think, look, primarily it comes down to seamless integration, right? And, as we have diversity of providers, healthcare systems, insurance, EMRs, technologies, as Jamie was pointing out earlier, I mean, the key is how do you transition all of those? And the core architecture of the AHS platform allows us to be able to seamlessly integrate, with not only just the major players like a Cerner or an Epic, but even kind of the smaller, like physician-driven or independent physician groups, EMRs, because at the end of the day, the access to the data is key. Being able to do it in a clean and efficient manner allows us then to be able to utilize that data and push it back out to the patients, right? So that we can have personalized, help with the personalized care plan, but also allow them to be able to have a say in their own care moving forward. But again, it starts with being able to integrate all of these disparate sources. And look, that's kind of always been the holy grail in health IT. The architecture we have is unique. It allows us these seamless integrations without really having to drill through firewalls, so on and so forth. So we're pretty excited about that, and I think it's going to have a longitudinal impact on how we look at delivering care from a data standpoint moving forward.
And if I could just add one quick thing in the last 30 seconds, it's data sharing of verified information. This is so critical, and it's been the paradox in this whole health information exchange environment, which has been, how do you make sure that the data that's been pulled is matching the actual patient? Patient data mismatching can be life-threatening. And the way we've designed our system, there's patient and physician verification of the data before it even gets moved into the platform itself. So in that regard, we add the human component from those most knowledgeable with the patient's clinical care, i.e. the patient, him or herself, or the doctor. So I think that sets us light years apart between that and the universal HITLAB, excuse me, I'm looking at HITLAB, the universal HIPAA exchange that makes it all legitimately matching what the 21st Century's Cure Act 2.0 insists upon, I think are tremendously advantageous for those who are able to start using it.
It's fantastic. Well, thank you both for joining today and looking forward to having you back on soon, and good luck in the continued adoption and deployment of the platform.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, everybody, we are on hour number 2 and we are cooking with gas, as they say. And one of the core components that we've seen with the development and the actual success of digital health technologies is intellectual property. As you all know, going back to e-prescribing in the 1990s, that made one particular company and one particular person many hundreds of millions of dollars when they patented e-prescribing. The idea of intellectual property is critical to not only protect what you're developing, but also to make sure that whether it's the Netflix and one-click subscription kind of idea, rental by subscription idea, or whether it's e-prescribing, that your idea is protected and it can actually grow without being encumbered or somehow copied by some other firm. And so David Lee is here today, and he's going to give us a one-on-one on intellectual property for all the startups in the audience and even the bigger institutions who are trying to still work through how intellectual property is a part of their idea and a part of their growth. And obviously, even if you're an institution, you need to have a good understanding of how intellectual property battles could affect how you're actually working through and purchasing this stuff, because you don't want to buy a piece of technology that's encumbered in lawsuits because of some kind of intellectual property dispute. So on that note, handing the virtual microphone and podium over to David Lee to give us some lessons in intellectual property. David.
Stan, thank you for having me. So thanks for the opportunity to discuss the IP protection today. I'd like to share some slides with everyone. I think it's the best way to demonstrate the role of IP for healthcare startups. And I hope this works.
Perfect. Yeah, you're sounding good. You're looking good. And then we just we'll wait for the screen share. And again, for anyone in the audience who wants to connect with David, please do click on his LinkedIn as well, which will be a great way to message him with any comments or questions or anything like that. But yeah, there we are seeing your screen. You're good to go.
Okay, wonderful. All right. So just a little bit about myself. I've been in the IP industry for about 20 years. I'm a patent attorney. During that time, I've represented a number of companies in the healthcare industry in all aspects of intellectual property, including obtaining patents, litigating or defending against patent litigation, as well as licensing. So today, I'd like to talk about 3 topics for healthcare startups. The first is, what is IP protection and how does it work to protect your company? Second is, what should a healthcare startup keep secret and when is the right time to pursue a patent? And the third is, why having some IP protection is better than none. Now, IP protection, IP refers to a number of different things. Mainly patents is what people have in mind, but also trademarks, copyrights, and trade secrets. I'm not going to go into what those are today, but because I think it's more helpful for us to discuss what the best way is for healthcare startups to think about IP. And so what is the main role of IP protection for healthcare startups? Is it offensive or is it defensive? Now, there is a common perception that IP is offensive, and it's understandable. We hear about lawsuits between Apple and Samsung, all sorts of companies filing patent lawsuits against each other, and the impression is that IP is offensive. But in reality, for a healthcare startup, the main role of IP protection is mainly defensive. And I like to use the analogy of a soccer goalkeeper. It's actually a pretty good analogy, and I'll explain why. The main task of a goalkeeper is to protect against competitors scoring on your goal. And that is exactly what the perspective ought to be for healthcare startups in thinking about IP protection. Now, on rare occasions, goalkeepers do score goals against the other team. There are some amazing videos online about that, showing that, and I encourage everyone to take a look. But it's very rare. Using that analogy, now how rare is it that patents get asserted and litigated against competitors? statistics show that really only 0.11% of active US patents are ever litigated. So what this means is that if a company has 1,000 patents, only one will ever be litigated, asserted. And if your competitors have 1,000 patents, only one of them will ever really potentially be litigated against you. Now, for a healthcare startup, 1,000 patents is just would be phenomenal. Most healthcare startups are looking at somewhere in the range of 5 to 10 patents, which means that if 0.1% of those patents are ever litigated, the chance of using patents offensively is very small. So why bother with patents, or why bother protecting against such small percentages when it seems unlikely that patents would really ever be litigated? And the answer is because litigation costs are enormous. These statistics on the screen now are from the American IP Law Association. They're a bit outdated, but they do illustrate that for patent lawsuits where there's less than $1 million at risk, what the patent litigants can expect is to spend at least $50,000 on that litigation, up to about $700,000 total. And these are just litigation costs. They don't involve costs of damages in case the company is found liable for patent infringement. They don't involve settlements where licensing fees and royalties may have to be paid. It only goes up from there. If the patent litigation involves $1 million to $10 million at risk, the parties can expect to spend anywhere between $80,000 to $1.5 million. And the numbers just go up from there when there's more at risk. And nowadays, 5 years later, these numbers are only higher. So the way to think about IP protection as a healthcare startup is to think about it as protecting your company against catastrophic risk. Using the soccer analogy, you can't block every shot on goal, but you should block just enough to stay in the game. And how do we do that? First is to understand the extent of the competitor's IP. Now, for your competitors, what do they have? Do they even have any IP? And if they do, how extensive is it? Then from there, determine the risk that IP poses against your company. If there's nothing out there, then it's minimal risk, potentially. If there's a lot, then it poses a lot of risk. And then from there, develop and implement a defense strategy to reduce that risk. Now, not everybody needs a professional goalkeeper, but sometimes on the right over here on the slide, a starting point is enough. Second topic, what to keep secret and when to patent. This is a very important question for healthcare startups because on the one hand, there is a desire to publish and get the word out about the new product, the platform. So to attract customer base, attract public interest in it. On the other hand, there's some worry that disclosing too much may allow others to get in on the new innovation and perhaps develop a competing product. One thing that many people think about when it comes to IP is filing patent applications, as I mentioned, as an offensive strategy. Patent applications are intellectual property that you can assert against others who may be trying to copy your product. But what I like to encourage is to think about patent applications as a defensive strategy. As we saw before, really only 1 in 1,000 patents are ever litigated. So really, patent applications are mainly a defensive tool. And now, how does that work? First is an earlier patent application that's filed can prevent later ones from becoming patents. Second one, a granted patent can usually deter competitor lawsuits if your granted patent also covers one of their products. And the third is, as a defensive strategy, patent applications are great for balancing confidentiality with IP protection because patent applications are confidential for 18 months. What exactly should you keep secret? And this is a question where we almost have to answer it in negative. And the three main points are information that's not needed by regulators, customers, investors, or clinical trials are information that are candidates for being kept secret. If you have any product algorithms that implement, for example, in the cloud, where competitors simply cannot access and reverse engineer it, that's also something that you can keep secret. And lastly, information that you won't need to publicize for advertising or marketing purposes, or that you won't be publishing to build credibility for your platform or tool, that's something that you can keep secret as well. On the flip side, when is the right time to file a patent application? Now, definitely before you disclose any information publicly or to really anyone else outside your company, that's the best time to file a patent application. So before disclosing information to regulators, customers, investors, or for clinical trials, before publicizing product features or capabilities, and ideally, the time to file a patent application is when the design for a product feature or for a product is settled and implementation details would simply be routine. So you don't need to have implemented a product. You don't need to have engaged a coder or manufacturer. When the design is settled and implementation is simply routine, that is a good time for a patent application. To conclude, some IP protection is better than none. This slide here illustrates an analysis we did, a fairly rough analysis of exactly what proportion of patent applications between 1970 and 2020 in the healthcare space were filed by large companies such as S&P 500, NASDAQ, or Dow companies, and which ones were filed by others. And the blue line here shows all patent applications filed in the space in that 50-year span. The gray line at the bottom shows the ones that were filed by the very, very large companies, and the line in orange shows that other companies, which are not as large and not public, also have a significant involvement and role in filing patent applications. So patent applications are not just for an IP protection, it's not just for large companies, it's for startups as well. There's always a right strategy for every healthcare startup. Cost is a main issue, and when international patent protection comes into play, cost is definitely very significant. One example of cost timing as a strategy for a healthcare startup is to, for example, if you file a patent application today, you can file it as a placeholder with fairly low cost. Within 12 months, you'll then need to file an international placeholder, assuming that's the right strategy at that time, to continue with placeholders at a slightly larger cost. Then at the 30-month period, which is about 2.5 years, that's when the significant costs start to roll in. And then every about a year and a half after that, there will be recurring costs as well. So there is a strategy where costs can be deferred and spread out over time. And if that's the right strategy, then it's simply a very viable one to defer costs for IP protection. So I like to use this slide again because it's very useful, but I added it and revised it in a way in a little bit just to say that not everyone needs a professional goalkeeper right away, and sometimes starting with a small one is enough to start. And that's it.
Amazing. Well, I don't know about the audience, but I've done a lot of work helping out folks like yourself. I just learned a ton. So thank you very much, David. That's a great presentation.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Stan.
And again, look them up on LinkedIn through the chat box that you've got in your Zoom folder here, and do get in touch with them. Just a phenomenal resource for the startup community all over the world. And we're really excited to have another executive join us from the ecosystem, and this one's from Pfizer. Joe Capillari is the executive director of Biostats and head of the health economics and operations research and outcomes research, for statistics, HEOR statistics at Pfizer. And very excited to have Joe join us here today and again provide the kinds of insights and the kinds of perspective that you all, our community, need in order to not just find the next big thing in digital health to improve patient care using digital technologies, but also the how to invest and how to purchase, how to and now analyze, evaluate these technologies so that there's the optimal adoption of technologies. The best money and is going to the best technologies. And in this situation, again, with what Joe's doing at Pfizer, and we'll learn more about that now, we're going to be looking at this ecosystem around health economics and outcomes research. Joe, how are you?
Hi, Stan. Thank you for your kind invitation. Thanks to HITLAB and inviting me. I'm very grateful and appreciative.
No, of course, and it's great to have you on the program. And again, hundreds of people from around the world are seeing this now. We'll see it in the future here, and obviously a lot of interest in what you do and the work that you do. And if you could just give everyone maybe a 1-minute capstone on your background.
Okay. Well, I earned a Master of Science degree in statistics from the City University of New York, PhD in psychometrics from Cornell University, and Master of Public Health and Epidemiology from Harvard University. I then spent the next 3 years on the faculty at Tufts University Medical Center before joining Pfizer in 1996. And partnering and collaborating with our health economics and outcomes research statistics group. In my group, which I had the HOR group it's a relatively small group of about 7 of us. We focus on patient-reported outcomes, development and validation of other clinical outcome assessments, meta-analysis, research synthesis, indirect treatment comparisons, network meta-analysis, for example. We also focus on health economics, cost effectiveness, budget impact analyses. And it's been a joy, 28 years and counting.
Amazing. Well, congratulations on that too, Joe. That's really impressive. And I think I'd like to start off, you and I had a nice talk about a month ago, and would love to start off just hearing more about the Palisade checklist. If you could introduce that and explain the significance of it in context of AI and machine learning applications in HEOR.
Right. Oh, thank you for the question, Stan. Palisade, it has a catchy acronym. I'm a New Yorker, so I'm thinking about during our conversation cruising along the Palisades there in New York, the mountains, and enjoying the view. And I'll provide you with the view with special acknowledgement and credit to a publication by Padula and colleagues published in Value in Health in 2020, titled Machine Learning Methods in Health Economics and Outcomes Research, the Palisade Checklist, Good Practices Report of an ISPOR task force. So what I'm sharing with you has its inspiration and content in that wonderful article by Padula and several other wonderful co-authors. The Palisade checklist: P, purpose; A, appropriateness; L, limitations; I, implementation; S, sensitivity; and A, algorithm; and E, explainability. That's what the acronym represents. Purpose is the Palisade checklist involves key considerations for evaluating the transparency of machine learning to stakeholders and decision makers. Regarding that P in Palisade, the purpose is the purpose of the algorithm clearly stated at the outset. It's about transparency. Is the implementation of the algorithm in healthcare setting fair and ethical? The A in Palisade, appropriateness. Is there a clear justification of the algorithm that it is acceptable in the context to which it is being applied, the particular instance? The L, limitations. Have the strengths and limitations in the context of purpose been identified? This should cover both the algorithm and any data sources used. The S, sensitivity. It also includes specificity. For classification algorithms, has the model performance and accuracy been appropriately evaluated in terms of the diagnostic metrics of sensitivity and specificity? The A, algorithm, specifically algorithm characteristics. Has the machine learning mechanism been clearly characterized and describe? Is there sufficient transparency for the results to be reproducible? Common theme: transparency, reproducibility, explainability. The D in Palisade is the selection of the data sets justified and are the key characteristics known. This should extend to the training sets, test sets, and validation sets. And finally, the E, explainability. Are the outputs of the algorithm understandable by both the healthcare professional and the patient? If we don't understand, we can't appreciate, and if we can't appreciate, there's little incentive to move forward.
That is fantastic. I'm assuming that pause is you're done.
The pause for theatrical effect. That's correct, Stan.
Phenomenal. No, that's great. And just for the audience's standpoint, I am posting the paper from Science Direct into the chat box. So if you all want to see the paper that Joe is referring to from Padgett et al., just take a look at the link in LinkedIn. Joe, this is great. So obviously this is an enormous checklist and a very important one considering all the work we're doing in AI today. If you could, can you just give us some examples of how AI and machine learning have been successfully applied in the world of HEOR?
Right. Oh, sure. Very good question. We're about practice. So I'm going to give 5 examples, one for each finger of one hand. And in the paper, the Padgett paper, there are 5 major categories. And I'll give an example for each of those 5 categories. One is called feature selection. The example there is to identify drug-drug interactions by data mining. A pilot study of warfarin-associated drug interactions was looked into, and the technique of random forest was applied to predict interventional normalized ratio. A logistic regression was then used for further investigation, and the point is to identify known interactions and potentially new ones. And paper was published in a cardiovascular quality of life journal by Hansen and colleagues to learn, if you wish to learn more about that. The second avenue is predictive analytics, and case study there is improved diagnostic accuracy for diabetic retinopathy. And the machine learning methods were used to provide greater specificity and sensitivity versus other approaches that were previously used that may have more of a tradition, for example, N of 1 diagnoses. Paper by Ting in the Journal of the American Medical Association 2017 goes into that. Causal inference is another area of general area, which we have an example of. This one, probability of a child's being discharged alive from the pediatric intensive care unit by a given day under a range of longitudinal feeding regimens. This is serious condition, and we wish to establish the benefit of that probability and how to deal with it. More information on this is by RIEF in the American Journal of Epidemiology 2017. Goes into the details on how we could refine that probability and do something about it in saving lives and improving quality of life.
That's great.
Yeah, just very briefly, just a couple more. One having to do with economic evaluation and cost effectiveness and hospital resources for effective prevention of pressure injuries. And finally, regarding cohort selection, use of a model-assisted cohort selection application using the Flatiron health data to provide more focus, targeting, classification for effective decision making. Again, all in the Padgett paper with references. I gone into more detail, but the papers will play it out in its full glory.
It's fantastic. And again, I know you're busy, and we got one last question for you here, but I think the key thing here is obviously, AI and machine learning is all very new. And obviously there's a good chunk of the audience here today that's working with manufacturers and life science companies. And so they're working in HEOR all the time. There's a lot of academics as well. They're in HEOR, and there's a lot of digital health companies that work with HEOR departments. So you've got a lot of experience here. What are some of the pitfalls or misconceptions about AI and machine learning around the HEOR field that your colleagues at startups and others should be aware of, and how is the Palisade checklist helping them?
Yeah, a challenge in the field of machine learning will need to overcome it, that we need to overcome is educating clinicians so that they better understand what machine learning methods produce and why they should be trusted. Related issue is the danger that machine learning algorithms can reinforce bias in healthcare delivery. Underserved populations, for example, by definition, have less representation in healthcare databases. Machine learning algorithms inherently reinforce those patterns through their algorithm, which is an extremely difficult problem to solve. Consistent with the criteria developed in this is poor guidance. The Palisade could afford more collaboration between communities of HEOR scientists and computer scientists with machine learning expertise to encourage that and to expand and build trust in machine learning methods, allowing for transparency and advancement of validation techniques that would make the methods more transparent, reproducible, and meaningful.
Theatrical pause.
Theatrical pause.
All right, Joe. Well, look, this has been tremendous. Again, everyone, you've got the scientific paper Joe referenced to start this off. And Joe, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate everything you're offering, and would love to have you back on one of our sessions again in the future.
Thanks again, Stan, and thank you all for listening, and best wishes.
So again, do look him up on LinkedIn and feel free to connect with him there. Certainly we'll have a lot more to hear from Joe. He's doing great work at Pfizer and really leading the field when it comes to understanding how to bring AI and machine learning into the field of health economics and outcomes research. And again, I think the important part to understand as well is that the Breakthrough Alliance is a part of these conversations and hosts these conversations every week on a weekly basis, sometimes 2 to 3 times a week. If you want to join the Breakthrough Alliance, I just put in the membership joining link into the chat box, and feel free to join. Again, there's different levels, there's different services. You can see what's offered there in terms of your connectivity, you're gaining more perspectives and insights, your ability to find mentors and make connections, and certainly the ability to learn a lot more about what's going on in the ecosystem. So, and it's also with some of the higher level memberships about brand amplification and voice amplification, things like that. So looking forward to having you all join that. Next up, we are really excited to host our global chair for the Breakthrough Alliance, the president of the Merck Global Fund, Bill Taranto, who is going to be talking with our own HITLAB's own Ansley Bowen, our community development manager. Ansley, over to you.
Thank you so much, and I'm so glad to get the opportunity to talk to Bill Taranto today. He's the president of Merck Global Health Innovation Fund. I'm sure a lot of you know of him, but I'm going to let him take about 30 seconds and introduce himself.
Well, hi, everybody. Thank you for letting me participate today in an interview. My name is Bill Taranto, and I am president of the Merck Global Health Innovation Fund, which is one of Merck's corporate venture funds that's dedicated 100% to digital and technology. We're a $500 million evergreen fund, and mostly focused on growth investing. And we invest across what we call pharma services. So the best way to kind of think about it is pharma needs a service. That's kind of where we're focused. So everything from R&D to supply chain and IT, patient-facing services, and real-world evidence and data. That's where we like to focus. So I look forward to talking to you today.
Thank you, Bill, and let's get right into it. What are the key criteria that you look for when evaluating potential investments in health tech startups? And are there any specific metrics or milestones that particularly influence your decision?
Well, as you might recall, we're growth investors, which means we're typically Series C or later. And we do A and B rounds occasionally, but we don't do pure startup or seed capital. But that notwithstanding, we do have criteria that we look for as a company moves, down the path from A funding to B funding, and hopefully to us, the C funding. Obviously, we look at probably the main thing at that level, once you get to the Series C, is looking at the revenue. And is there a paying customer at this point? Do they have reimbursement? Who's paying for it? And what's the potential volume to grow this business beyond what it is? Because as we put in growth capital, we're trying to, blow out this company in a sense to get it to, from 50 million to 100 million or whatever the number is at that time. So one of the key, pieces we look is revenue. Where's the revenue coming from? And truly in the end, who's willing to pay for that particular service? We obviously look at the management and what their experience is. One of the funniest things that we always see when something gets to the growth round is they typically don't have a professional CFO. And a lot of times we're looking to probably bring in a new CFO. It's usually been somebody that's from the family or a bookkeeper or an accountant, but not somebody that's a full-time CFO. So that's one of the key things we look at from an employer perspective or employee perspective is, do they have a professional CFO? And the other kind of odd thing you find too when it gets to the Series C round is they may have created great technology, but sometimes they don't know how to sell it. So again, sometimes we're making sure that they have a good marketing and sales team or leader in order to sell the product. So that's kind of three fundamental areas that we're looking at, in order to bring this forward. But there's other metrics that we look at too. Again, when looking at the financials, not just the revenue, but what are the costs of the product? How close are they to being EBITDA positive? How close are they to cash flow positive? So a lot of things like that. And then the main thing that we're looking at as well is, are they solving an unmet need in healthcare? A lot of times we see a lot of companies that they're on the periphery of healthcare, or there's already a lot of solutions within the area that they're focusing on. For example, in diabetes, we see a lot of diabetes apps, a lot of weight loss apps, a lot of things that help the diabetic patient. That's a crowded market. So we're also trying to look for assets that have differential value in the healthcare market. That's kind of the term we use. Are they solving a use case that will fundamentally change the way healthcare is thought about or delivered or impacts the patient? So that's another key thing that we look at. So it's a broad number of things, but I would say the first few that I mentioned are probably, once you get to the Series C sort of areas, what we mostly look at.
And when talking about those solutions that you're looking for in healthcare, what emerging trends do you see in the healthcare sector that you think are going to be the most promising for venture investments? And how do you see those trends really shaping the future of healthcare innovation?
Well, we're no different than any other industry. We're talking about AI, right? And what is the ultimate impact of AI across everything? One of the big areas that we're looking at in AI is in the drug discovery. We think that the use of AI can help us speed up how fast we can get a drug to market. And so we're looking at it in three different areas. One is what we call data and samples. So that's looking at large data sets that look at different models. And it can be in oncology, obviously, we're focusing, or any kind of therapeutic area. And then we look at AI and ML in biology. So we're looking at companies that, think about how do they look at cell models, simulated cell models, and how do they maybe find, a drug faster than we could before. And that's kind of what we got to do in biology. And the last is, we're certainly still a vaccines company, and we're looking how does AI help us in vaccine delivery. But then if you think broader than just pharma services where we sit, we're seeing the use of AI in manufacturing and supply chain around how we do better track and trace. How do we track raw materials coming in, finished goods going out? And probably the biggest boon beyond what we see in sort of the pharma services, how's it going to affect the patient? How do doctors use AI to deliver better care? We're seeing monitoring devices using AI that are faster, better, that can almost monitor anything. We're seeing, different types of tools in which a physician can diagnose better. In diagnostic space, we're seeing all sorts of new AI tools where they can diagnose patient faster and better. One of the areas we're highly interested in is where AI is, we think, on the forefront in lung screening for cancer. So we think that's a really important area. But again, it all uses AI. So I would say for us, probably the biggest area, and much like every other industry we're focused on, how is AI actually going to affect what we do? Then how does it sit on top of analytics and informatics sort of engines that help you then take all this data that's coming off all these different tools and devices and help you make decisions that lead to outcomes, because ultimately we're an outcomes company. But I would say that's probably, near term, the biggest area that we're really excited in. And I think all of healthcare is probably just as excited. And again, we're just like every other industry, is what is the ultimate impact of AI? It's sort of the newest tool that gets everybody excited.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that so many people are talking about AI and what it can do in collaboration with our already existing solutions, and how, we can really kind of come together with AI and hopefully have some really great solutions that come out in 2024 and of course in the years forward. And speaking on kind of collaboration and partnerships, how important are strategic partnerships and collaborations for the startups that you invest in? And can you share some examples of how partnerships have accelerated the growth and success of your portfolio companies?
Yes, it's probably one of the most important things we do. Sometimes we joke that the investing is the easy part. It's getting a commercial agreement, whether it's between Merck and the portfolio company or another pharma company. Because again, we do pharma services, so it's important that the pharma industry uses these assets. Mm-hmm. And where it really makes a difference is it does a couple different things. Number one, it helps the portfolio company learn how to work better with the pharma industry. So when they do that kind of partnership, they can build whatever their tool is, whatever their, program that they're offering to the pharma industry, how do they invest to make it better, to better serve pharma? And then the pharma side is helping teach the portfolio company how do they use this technology, right? And then how do they think about it once they're using it and give that feedback back? So it's sort of a closed loop sort of feedback system of where the portfolio company is giving feedback back to the pharma, and pharma is giving feedback back. And then from that, when we invest our dollars, we can think about then how do we grow it better, faster, and bigger, and accelerate it? Because that's the biggest thing, is accelerating these assets. Because even Series C investments are startup companies in the end, right? And the hardest thing to do in digital is scaling. And it still all starts locally and regionally, and we got to think of ways, how do we get this across all 50 states, maybe even outside the US, and scale globally? So these partnerships are really important in growing the companies. And we probably, I think we're sitting on about 45 companies right now, and about 35 of our companies have commercial agreements with our portfolio companies. And we think it's the best way to accelerate the growth of these companies. And then what ends up happening too is that if we can accelerate that, then the value of our investment goes up, but also then the value to, say, Merck, who's learning how to use these technologies in a better way. As we were talking earlier, AI, we still have to learn how to use those technologies, right? We're not a technology company. We're a pharma company that creates ethical pharmaceuticals, so we need to learn how to use those kind of technologies. And so it's a symbiotic relationship. And so if that happens, then Merck's business is better, and even pharma, if the other farmers are using those services, then our business as a venture capitalist is better, because we're growing a company. And so it's probably one of the most important things. The investment alone doesn't help the company. Mm-hmm. They've got to have partnerships, and especially in my industry, across all pharma, not just Merck. It's probably even more important. In fact, I would even say probably if pharma's already working with them before we even invest, they've learned a lot already about how they're working with it, and then they've thought about how our investment dollars will grow their business. So it's probably the most important thing, I think, of sort of post-investment or pre-investment is that partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was great to get your insights on that. But I'm also curious, what are some of the common challenges that health tech startups face, and how can they overcome them? And do you have any advice also to give early stage startups when they're seeking funding and support from a venture fund like yours?
So at least I can talk on healthcare for a minute, because obviously that's my specialty. So rather than healthcare, we're probably one of the most complicated industries that are out there. We joke that when you get a prescription, there's 20 different either individuals or companies within the system that have to touch your prescription before you even get it. You may not even know if you get it at that point. Mm-hmm. And so one of the key things that we try to tell healthcare startups is understand the industry and all the touch points that occur within the industry, because it's very complicated. Everything from the payer side to the physician side, to the pharma side even, where do all the pieces come together? And you have to understand the regulatory pathway that exists. And it's not just about always getting approval for something, but even how do you get to reimbursement, and then who pays for it? Why do they pay for it? That's just part of the regulatory pathway. So one of the biggest challenges, and one of the things I encourage startups to do, is really get to understand not only the space that you're focused on in healthcare, but healthcare more broadly. I think another interesting thing that startups struggle with is how to appropriately spend the money that they have raised. Sometimes they underfund themselves, or sometimes they overfund themselves and think they have to burn through that money. And that's get back to when we were talking about earlier about having a CFO in a sense, where you really have to learn to manage the money. And then one of the third thing I think is again, don't go into a crowded space in healthcare. Try to pick a space where you're solving, like I said, we call it a use case, but solving a problem that has that disproportionate value, because that's what's going to help you grow the fastest. But within that, where's the biggest need? And it's okay to interview, like ask pharma, what are they trying to do, right? And they'll tell you, and that's what you should try and solve. Or, what are the physicians struggling with? Interview the physicians that are out there within the area you're interested in. What are they struggling with? And they'll tell you. And it's a great learning experience of how you think about, growing. I think, just really being smart about the area in which you want to grow your business. So that's even thinking outside healthcare. I just broadly say to anybody, learn the industry that you're investing in or building your company in. And if you can do that, you really can just build a better company, but it's easier said than done. I think one of the, other things about startups is it's really hard to build a company. And you got to take a bit of a long game. And if you look at some of the most successful companies that are out there, if you really look at their timeline, they've done pivots, and they've changed their model. It takes time to build a company, and certainly within healthcare, it takes a long time. And so we tell everybody to be patient. It's not going to happen overnight. And build your company slowly. You don't got to, go from that A round to the C round overnight. It's take your time and build through each stage, because even after we invest, there's another growth round. It's not just our growth. You keep building the company as you go along, but take the long game. Be patient when you're thinking about building your company, because it hardly ever happens overnight. Yeah, there's always the exception to the rule, but really doesn't happen overnight. And then, the last thing is think about your personnel, the employees that you have. A lot of times you start your company with your friends and everything, but even yourself, you may not be the right person to bring it to certain stages. You might have been the right person to bring it to 25 million sales, but you're not the right person to bring it to 100. And you have to be honest with yourself. And so it's thinking about, as you're building the company, is bringing in the right type of employees, because literally that's what makes a difference as well. It's not just the capital, it's the people you've hired, because they're ultimately the ones delivering whatever it is you've been asked to deliver to us, the end user, and the investment market. So I think those are some key things that we think about. That also go back to what we look at, the first question you asked me, what do we look at when we invest? All those things need to be there as well. And it's things that those investors, the startup companies, no matter what stage you are, it affects you at any stage, you need to be thinking about those things.
Absolutely. And Bill, thank you so much for coming on today. You're definitely the person to talk to when we're talking about startups and venture. And it's so great to kind of flip the script and actually interview you, because typically you do a lot of moderating and interview others on our program. So it was so great to kind of sit down and talk with you about this. Of course, Bill's information and LinkedIn will be provided in the chat. So if you'd like to connect with him, please do. But again, Bill, thank you so much for your time. I know you're super busy, so really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. And it's great to be on the other side and be interviewed. So I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Always a pleasure. And now I'll pass it back over to you.
All right. Thank you, Ansley. And thank you, Bill. What a great conversation. And one of the things that's important to remember that Bill always talks about, if you are looking for funding from the Merck Global Fund, it's important to remember to look at their portfolio and ask yourself, how would I either buy services from one of these portfolio companies, or how would I sell services to one of these portfolio companies? And if you can figure that out with 2 or more of those companies, then you are probably a good fit for that fund at some point based upon your revenues. And again, Bill also has a number of contacts who are investing in angel and seed and A rounds that build up the portfolio for him later on down the line. I am putting his portfolio company link into the chat box. Take a look at those portfolios. And again, if you are interested in meeting Bill or meeting more people like Bill and Joe, these are the sorts of people that are in the Breakthrough Alliance community. And we have virtual conversations every week with folks like this to give you more perspectives and more insights on how to do what you're trying to do better. and how to optimize what you are trying to do as well. And with that said, speaking of Breakthrough Alliance communities, the Breakthrough Alliance general membership and the complimentary fall ticket, the first one valued at about $100, and then the second one valued at $5,000 is up for grabs. Go to the chat box and check out the link that Sammy has posted in there. Fill out the fields, enter in the word vouch, and you are good to go. You will be entered into the competition for one of you will win a Breakthrough Alliance membership, and one of you will win a ticket to the summit coming up December 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in Times Square, New York City, in the Microsoft Tech Center. And next up, we are really excited to continue these incredible conversations with Vouch, of course, with Cassidy from Vouch, and Amy West from Novo Nordisk, who leads the US digital transformation team there, and turning the virtual microphone and stage over to Amy. Amy, it's all yours. You are on mute.
Sorry about that. I still managing my computer technical things.
No worries, you're good now.
But thanks for the introduction, and I'm really excited to be here again. And the next session, we're going to be talking about the rising tide of digital health, addressing new risks in a connected world. And I'm very happy to be joined to moderate the session with Cassidy Sarnicki, who is the go-to-market lead for digital health and life sciences for Vouch. And Vouch is a leader in digital health and life sciences insurance. And before we jump into the topic, though, which is going to be about the considerations that startups should be thinking about as it relates to risks and what they can do to mitigate them, like insurance options, I'm going to hand it over to Cassidy to introduce herself in a little more detail and also talk a little bit more specifically about Vouch. So welcome, Cassidy.
Thank you, Amy. I'm super excited to be here and be having this conversation with you all. I'm Cassidy. I lead digital health and life sciences at Vouch. We've pioneered the go-to business insurance for venture-backed companies from pre-seed all the way up to pre-IPO. We have over 4,500 clients and also offer 10 proprietary coverages and have become the leading insurer for many of the top VCs portfolio companies.
That's great. And I think it's a really important and interesting area of need when we're thinking about the startups, because I think at times we don't realize that there are risks involved, obviously, but are there how can you mitigate those risks? What exposures do you have? And what can you do to offset those things? So from your perspective, what risks and exposures are you seeing as we're seeing the rapid rise and dynamic changes in digital health?
Yeah, there's a ton of risk right now in digital health. Patient information and communications are all being done virtually. And so companies still have this duty to ensure the security of that data. So we're seeing in this new era of digital health, there's an increased risk of cyber attacks. There's new exposures around personal injury, especially as it relates to the new integration of AI that does open up companies to greater risk and liability.
Yeah, and I think we all probably have experienced over time the notification that, oh, there's been a security breach, whether it's through a healthcare orientation or financial services or whatever, which is very scary. Can you give some examples of those instances and what some claim examples are?
Yeah, of course. I'll start with personal injury. So let's say, maybe you have a mental health condition or you're just looking for mental health support. There's so many teledoc companies these days. So let's say you go on Google, you find one and they say, hey, we can guarantee we'll match you with a provider or psychiatrist this very same day with the type of care that you need. So you sign up, maybe you fill out an application, it might even have an AI integration of recommending the type of care that you need to support you. You pay a subscription fee. And let's say several days go by and you still don't get matched. Or let's say you do get matched that very same day, but it's not to a provider that actually specializes in the care that you're looking for. So in that instance, a patient or a customer could actually claim that this either prolonged or either induced further emotional suffering. That would fall under what would be deemed personal injury. There could even be a claim there around false advertising. And so this is typically excluded in most insurance policies, but at Vouch, we actually include it in our digital health endorsement. Another claim example I could think about is around AI, right? So we're seeing this huge rise of AI scribes, AI recommendations in a patient's clinical care journey. And let's talk about worst case scenario, right? It gives a wrong recommendation for that patient, or it scribes the wrong information that it's being told. So in that instance, that could lead to a variety of disastrous outcomes for a patient. On most standard E&O policies today, they actually do not cover losses by AI products, services, or algorithms. So you do have significantly greater risk and liability if you have any type of integration with AI.
That's really interesting. Those examples are great because I think that we're not always thinking about these different aspects and the fact that you're exposed, there's risk there, but you can potentially mitigate that with insurance. So, as a startup, when should companies be thinking about getting insurance?
Yeah, companies should start thinking about getting insurance as soon as they have any assets and liabilities they want to protect. Other inflection points could be just after you've raised any capital, you're getting ready to launch a new product, you have your first customer partner, or even your first dollar. For later stage and growth stage companies that are scaling very rapidly, your risks tend to open up very, very quickly. So we actually offer a complementary coverage analysis that will help more complex companies identify where these areas of risk are.
That's great. And in generally speaking, big picture, how can digital health companies mitigate these types of risks so that obviously the insurance is going to be really important, but what steps can they take to mitigate any sort of course of action or something along those lines?
Yeah, there's a lot of new technologies in this space that affect how a patient is being treated, right? So from AI note-taking to clinical decision support tools, these are all integrated into a patient's clinical journey. I can think about how many of us have probably received notification that we've had a data breach, right? And our information has been leaked. And so I even think about United Health Group most recently that had that massive cyber attack where their patient was released on the dark web. It cost them over $860 million to resolve that. So, I think about even other primary care companies like One Medical or TIA that are at significantly greater risk of a cyber attack. So things that you can do to mitigate this would be, number one, having robust security practices. Number two would be obtaining the right insurance. And number three would definitely be, trying to be as regulatory compliant as possible. Vouch does offer 2 first-of-its-kind coverages that would help digital health companies mitigate these risks. And the first one is our digital health endorsement. It covers bodily and personal injury, as well as levels of coverage around defense costs associated with wrongful acts and false advertising. This is typically excluded in 99% of any other insurance policy out there. And then our AI insurance was rolled out earlier this year. And it's the first of its kind. It covers any losses caused by AI products, services, algorithms. It even covers bias and discrimination, as well as levels of coverage around defense costs. So, we all want to ensure that patients and customers are protected in this new world of digital health. And really the best thing that you can do is to obtain the proper insurance for your company and implement the best practices to conduct business in a better way.
I think that's great. And I think obviously the work that Vouch does, you're working directly with the companies to help them, better, make sure that they're protected from the risks and things like that. But ultimately, it really is about how do we ensure that we are protecting the privacy and the data of the customers, the patients. So at the end of the day, it's really about the patient. And I love that sort of patient-centric sort of foundation of the work that you're doing. So congratulations on that. But thank you for this conversation. I think you've really raised some important topics that people might not necessarily be thinking of. And even when we think about AI and the fact, obviously everybody's talking about AI now, but there are risks associated with it, and how can you protect yourself and your customers? So insurances like the ones that Vouch is offering, can play a great role. So that's wonderful. Any last comments you have before we sign off?
Just thank you again, Amy, for the interview. And if you have any questions and you want to know more about Vouch or really understand what risks your business might have, feel free to reach out to me via email or directly on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cassidy. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks for being here.
Outstanding. Amy, thank you. And again, for those of you who are interested in Vouch, take a look at the LinkedIn on the chat box off to your side on your Zoom, and definitely give them a call. They've got a lot of good things going on. They're seeing extraordinary uptake on what they're doing. And we have Amy coming back.
I didn't leave. I'm still here.
Amy is going to now talk to one of the leaders in life sciences when it comes to regulatory affairs and digital external engagements, Tahinder Singh. Handing it back over to Amy.
Thanks again. And obviously always enjoying doing these chat moderations. And I'm so happy to now be talking with Tahinder Singh, who is, as Stan mentioned, is the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs and Digital External Engagement at Kenvue, which is an American consumer health company. So welcome, Tahinder. And before I jump into our conversation about some of the regulatory considerations in the healthcare space, I'd like you to just share a little bit of background on yourself, a little more detail, and then talk a little bit about Kenvue.
Sure. Thank you, Amy. I have about 25 years in life sciences industry. By training a pharmacist, but always had an interest in how can we use emerging technologies and digital technologies to make it better for our patients, consumers, and even to run company operations. So my career has been a trajectory across multiple functions doing digital. I've previously worked at P&G Healthcare in Europe, then in the US global headquarters. Then joined Johnson & Johnson about 7 years back. And now Kenvue is a Johnson & Johnson consumer healthcare spin-off. So I can lead regulatory affairs and digital external engagement at Kenvue. So thank you for this opportunity to be here.
Yeah, great. And it's a great evolution to your career path too. Really interesting. So as we think about this ever-changing and dynamic health sector that we're all sort of playing in at this point, and we think about innovation that's happening in this space, which is rapidly changing and accelerating all the time. From a regulatory perspective, how do you stay informed about the innovations and the regulatory developments in the healthcare space? And how does this knowledge impact your role at Kenvue?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, right? There's so much going on. And especially when a company like previously J&J, I had a similar role at J&J, now at Kenvue. We are about in 140 plus markets, right? So I think the first thing in such a large operation we have to do is actually prioritize where we want to really focus on. So I think we kind of focus on what are our lead markets. And even in those lead markets, there's a lot of innovation going on. And I kind of divide it into staying up to speed on what's going on in innovation and then staying up to speed on how the regulations are progressing. So I'll first talk about how we stay up to speed on innovation. So the innovation, staying up to speed on innovation happen in three ways. It happens online, it happens through formal channels, and then it also happens through in-person networking. Places like HITLAB, right? This is a great place to kind of come together and kind of exchange ideas. I think the other major resource I personally use and depend on is actually LinkedIn. Being connected with similar-minded individuals, looking for topics. There are a couple of digital health newsletters one could subscribe to. So I think that's the incoming funnel of staying up to speed on innovation. Now, if we shift to the regulatory side is happens through more formal interactions with the regulators, as the regulators are actually publishing information. We have actually mechanisms that whenever updates are happening on healthcare agency websites, we can bring that information in. And then we have filtering criteria put on it that whenever a regulation is published, we actually use artificial intelligence to kind of bring that in, create a summary of that, and see whether it is worthwhile exploring what is really happening in this regulation. Sometimes it does have an impact on our business, and then we actually start doing action planning around it. Other times it just gets put on the watch list. This is some area to watch for. I think the regulatory websites are the major resource of information there for mature markets. For other places, we also depend on our trade organizations, right? Professional organizations, industry organizations, and then finally conferences. So both for innovation and staying up to speed on regulations, I think all three are important. Doing it online, using tech, websites, formal channels through associations and meetings with regulators. And third, I think in-person places like HITLAB.
Well, that's great advice and some good best practices, I think, for the audience here as well, because, you know, in Bill Toronto, when he was speaking during his chat, he highlighted the fact that really understanding the regulatory environment, the regulatory pathways are critically important if you know, if you're in the startup space. So I think what you just shared is good direction for others that are looking to gain better understanding of the regulatory environment. So thanks for that. And when we think about consumer health, it's obviously a huge area of opportunity for innovation, and there are many different entities entering this space, from large organizations to small and startups. What are the biggest regulatory challenges that you foresee for consumer health startups in the near future, and how can they be addressed?
I think one of the biggest consumer health challenges, what I foresee in terms of data. I think being able to collect good quality data and also stay compliant, right? There's so much regulation coming in terms of where data can be stored, where the servers need to be located, can it cross borders, can it not cross borders? To me, I think that is the biggest challenge. And some of the strategies to apply there are going to be, if data is not going to cross, say, from Europe to US or vice versa, or from some other geography that there are restrictions, structure the setup such that the data doesn't have to kind of cross the boundaries. Because I think when we start looking reactively to it, oh, we now need to be compliant with this, I think that's where it actually really becomes messy. And the other advice I would have for startups is focus on one market at a time, right? Rather than actually try and focus multiple geographies. Because when we actually go multiple geographies, it is going to bring more and more requirements. So I think clearly knowing where there is a big market and then really getting focused on that actually simplifies the regulatory setup, because then you're just kind of looking at the regulations for a given market.
Yeah, I think that's great advice too, because you know, you got to start and sort of get competency in one area before you can kind of go. You don't want to boil the ocean, so to speak. But yeah, that's great advisement there too. So in your role in navigating the complex regulatory landscape, obviously healthcare is so complex, especially in the US in particular. How do you support innovation and collaboration with startups coming from Penview perspective?
I think that, again, two ways, formal and informal. I think informal is participating on networks like this, talking to startups, always open. Any invite I get through LinkedIn, I never say no. I always connect with anybody because every idea is a good idea. And then if there is interest in actually, hey, look, this is something which is in tune with our mission of what we are doing and it matches up with our brands, then we have a formal channel that we have the business development team and a funnel where we actually bring in ideas and then formalize the conversation.
Well, you're going to get hit up on LinkedIn with that invitation, which is really kind and generous. And I would encourage everybody to do that reach out, because as Bill Toronto had said in his chat, the regulatory understanding, the pathways are critically important as you progress with the work that you're doing as a startup. And to tap into expertise like we're talking about here is invaluable. And Tegander, thank you so much for your generous time here, as well as coming out of this, because again, you're going to get a lot of invitations via LinkedIn. But it was a pleasure talking with you, and wish you all the best in your continued success.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you, and happy to help anybody who needs help.
Take care.
Thanks.
That's fantastic. And Amy, another great interview. Thank you for doing that. And again, we are in the last half hour of the August Symposium around innovation and venture. And you've seen now a number of phenomenal perspectives from the head of the largest digital health fund in the world, Bill Toronto, and the Merck Global Fund, to some of the biggest startups that are scaling the fastest, from folks like Actual Health Services and Helix VM and the Proficient Lab. So just an incredible day. And again, hats off to the entire HITLAB crew who put this together, a team of over 10 people that do this every month for you all. And again, don't forget about the importance challenge. I mean, again, tremendous economic value here. The first one, a little bit smaller, the general membership to the Breakthrough Alliance membership at $99. And then the second one, the $5,000 ticket to the HITLAB Summit at Microsoft Tech Center in Times Square, coming up this December 2, 3, and 4. And the code for this time is called X-Ray, XRAI. And so if you go to the link that Sammy just popped in the chat box there, you will see a link to go ahead and jump into a website and fill out some data and have your chance to get some free prizes. All right. And to start off the last half hour of the August Symposium, we have our own, again, Jerry Antomato, who's going to be interviewing Dan Scarf from X-Ray itself, of course, and talking about revolutionizing healthcare through an innovative technology platform that's seeing tremendous growth. Jerry?
Yeah, cheers, Dan. Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to have Dan on the program. Those of you who have been following HITLAB know that Dan was one of the winners of our Age Tech Collaborative from AARP pitch competition in June. So congratulations, Dan, for coming through that and coming in, I think, third place. Really, really well deserved. And we want to get right into it and hear more about X-Ray, of course. And we'd love to hear about its primary applications, what you're currently doing, of course, and more importantly, I think, what inspired you to develop X-Ray glass.
Well, thanks so much for having us. It's an absolute honor. Just quick 20 seconds of background on me. I spent 20 years building what would become the world's largest Microsoft partner. One of my small claims to fame is I literally wrote the book on how to deploy Microsoft Cloud in organizations like healthcare, for instance. But we sold that business in the summer of 2020 to a company called Cognizant, who some of you might know for their Trizetto product. And so I was a little bit of a loose end. Back in the UK at the time with my granddad, who lost his hearing, like many 96-year-olds do, and sat around with his family, unable to engage in the conversation. And he was just kind of daydreaming, and kind of had this epiphany about why can't we combine real-time subtitles with augmented reality to kind of create live subtitles? And so the idea was born on that simple idea, and that was nearly 3 years ago now.
No, that's amazing. What an inspiration to start off a technology like this. And at the AARP competition, actually, I think you dialed in from one of the launches of your own set of glasses for the first time, your X-Ray AR1. What was the rationale behind that?
So, I mean, we've had our application available now for a couple of years, but there were some challenges because you had to get the software on one device, you had to go and get some separate glasses. The original glasses had tinted lenses, they had a wire, they weren't really ideal for what we wanted to do. And the feedback that we got from many of our users is just make it simple. We just want 2 buttons, and we want one to turn it on and off, and we want one to start and stop the subtitles. They also said, we don't want wires, we want to just be able to pop this thing on and away you go. And we also don't want the tinted lenses. So, kind of combining all of those requirements together, we launched our own glasses, which are kind of these ones here, which are quite fun. Again, you can't quite see them because the background is cutting off and not necessarily going to win any style awards just yet, but all now completely self-contained, all the software built into them. So it's really exciting, to be able to provide this technology to users for the first time.
No, that's awesome, and definitely a fashion statement, I think, if I'm allowed to say that. Now, there's definitely a sort of a generic sort of application in terms of, being able to use the technology in all sorts of walks of life. But of course, HITLAB being a healthcare focused organization, we'd love to hear about the actual specific needs or even challenges that separate X-ray glass from other wearable health technologies that are out there for healthcare.
Yeah, I mean, healthcare is just such an enormous opportunity. We believe many of our users, unfortunately, regularly visit healthcare facilities. Just the idea of having a conversation which is occurring about you, between other people stood around you, and you're not able to engage in that conversation. There are decisions being made about your health, perhaps, that you're not able to fully understand. So, the ability for patients to be able to wear glasses like this, to be able to be fully immersed into, conversations which are regarding them, we think is super important. One of the other pieces of functionality which we've built out, which funnily enough was the result of demand from users, is real-time translation. Now, again, in a health setting, we think there are incredible applications for that, both on glasses, but also on tablets and phones. The ability to be able to bridge language as a barrier to communication, we think could potentially be even more worthwhile. And again, you look at an emergency situation, there's not always time to get translators, especially not given the number of languages which are spoken around the world. So, this ability to harness almost a Babel fish to be able to translate between any language, we're super excited about.
Yeah, I think that's super important, especially since, you mentioned there are different languages, between cultures and countries, but there's also the translation of the healthcare language and jargon itself, which I think, if you're already fighting that one barrier is super important. You eliminate all the other barriers as well. Now, it's obviously important for a lot of the technology that they're able to, integrate and be implemented in various different systems. What are the plans so far for X-ray glass in terms of integration and implementation into the current healthcare systems and workflows to, really improve efficiency and, most importantly, patient outcomes?
Yep. So, I mean, we've designed the entire system from the ground up to be, capable of integrating with all kinds of different systems. As you mentioned, healthcare systems, amongst the most important, to make sure that we have a complete, accurate record of exactly what happened, and transcripts of conversations and meetings between doctors and patients. I think is super interesting that you actually could capture that a lot more easily. Again, especially across that language barrier, and then be able to save those to the patient notes. So, in its most basic form, that's what we hope to get to. But then you could start to do all kinds of analysis over the top of that. Again, if you had all of those transcripts accurately captured, not handwritten notes, imagine the kind of analysis that you would be able to do across all of those interactions between all of the doctors and all of the patients. What's the general mood? Are there something, what's the general persona of people? So, there's all kinds of exciting things you can do once you've got that data available.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you can talk to this specific question, Dan, not just on behalf of yourself, but other founders and startups who are moving sort of into that medical space in terms of medical device regulations and maintaining those high standards of safety and reliability. But what are you anticipating with that move? And that, sort of those challenges that are associated with that, and hopefully that'll sort of give some advice to some of the other startups and founders that are listening in today?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, we heard from the previous speaker about this, so I won't even attempt to appear as knowledgeable as he was. But you know, it comes with challenges and opportunities, shall we say? You know, the challenges, of course, is there's a huge amount of red tape that you've got to go through, the accreditations. You've got to make sure that it's a quality product and so forth. So there is some challenges up front, but the opportunity, of course, if you can get your device listed as a medical device is you've got access to funding, of course, as we start to distribute this around the world. You know, various customs import duties are based on whether this device is a medical device or not, and you're talking about, you know, a phenomenal difference in import duty. So, you know, there are huge opportunities that we are, you know, aware of and striving for. So that's why it's something that we're committed to do. Again, not globally. I think the previous presenter said, you know, pick your locations carefully. And so we intend on doing that, picking a couple of geographies. But if we can get that medical device accreditation, that would, of course, be incredible.
No, that's awesome and sound advice and perspective coming from you, Dan, I think. And just to wrap up, I know we're at time and unfortunately we can't get to absolutely everything I think you want to discuss. But how do you see the role of the product sort of evolving, you know, within the space and of course within the broader context of digital health and medicine and sort of the future as to where you guys are going in the next 6 to 12 months or so?
Yeah, I mean, we've got this long-term vision of, you know, how personal assistants are going to start to follow you around and how your data is going to start to follow you around. And again, in a healthcare setting, it's crying out for this ability to be able to take all of this information and make it available to patients in a more digestible form. And, you know, we think the X-ray software could be an excellent way to allow people access to that greater understanding of, you know, what is happening as part of their healthcare program. And we're really excited about that.
Awesome. Well, I mean, we're definitely at HITLAB and in the community looking forward to see, you know, how it pans out for X-ray Glass and yourself, Dan. It's been a pleasure having you on the program, of course, and congratulations again for coming through the competition as one of our winners. And as I mentioned earlier, pleasure to have another Brit on the program. And I think Ansley and Stan do this on purpose to make me more homesick by interviewing all the English and British people on the program. But appreciate your time, Dan, and I'll hand it back over to Stan.
Outstanding and great interview. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Jerry. Well done. And again, as we wind down the last half hour, we have again the HITLAB's own Ansley Bowen. She's a community development manager and also manager on the Women's Health Tech Initiative, and handing the virtual mic and the virtual podium over to Ansley.
Thank you, Stan. And I'm a pleasure to be able to talk to Newsy and AJ today from Silicon Valley Bank. It's great to have y'all on the program, and I'd love if y'all could quickly do an introduction on both of yourselves.
Hi, Ansley. Thank you. Thank you for having us. My name is Newsy. I'm a VP on our healthcare and life science team, working on the startup banking team. Similar to AJ, we work really closely together. I'm on the business development side. I say I get to do all the fun stuff here at the bank. And I'll hand it over to AJ.
Thanks, Newsy. Good morning, everyone. My name is AJ Fortier. I'm the VP of our medical device and healthcare technology portfolios for the West region of the United States. As Newsy mentioned, we're a part of the startup banking group, which banks companies who are pre-Series A. And specifically, I am on the relationship side of things. So as an SVB client, I'm your go-to banker. I'm the one who sits at the intersection between, you know, your products and services at the bank, also your access to the broader innovation economy ecosystem and partners and stakeholders there. So really kind of a quarterback on your behalf to ensure that we position you for, you know, the highest probability of success moving forward.
Amazing. And I'll go ahead and get started. And with the first question to Newsy, what are the current trends in funding for life sciences and healthcare startups, and how have these trends evolved over recent years?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we've had an interesting couple of years. You know, we saw a lot of highs in 2021. And, you know, we're definitely not where we were in 2021 for 2024. However, you know, there's, I think, a lot of hope. So for this year so far, in terms of number of deals, we're on track to kind of outpace 2021 in terms of number of deals. Of course, total funding is not where 2021 was. And kind of overall, we've had, an increase of down rounds or flat rounds. But one piece of hope is that, like for Series A valuations and deal size, they are increasing from last year. So I would say like we're closer to where we were pre-pandemic, and we're starting to kind of see things pick up again for 2024.
Perfect. And hopefully that'll continue into 2025 and end up beating the 2021's records there. And then AJ, how do you see the role of venture capital evolving in life sciences and healthcare? And then what specifically are investors looking for startups in these fields?
Yeah, great question. I think the role of venture capital is going to expand over time, especially with all of the developments on the tech side with artificial intelligence. I think deeper investments in therapeutics, hardware devices, things of that sort are going to become more prominent if investors are looking for outsized returns. And that's a good news for our life science and healthcare founders, specifically in the device space where, obviously funding is much lower than, for example, biotech or therapeutics, and obviously valuations are much lower as well. Hopefully that can increase over time as, technology starts to blend with the hardware and investors seek higher returns outside of just typical software as, those valuations become more compressed over time due to the competitive nature of the market.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing those insights with our audience. I know they're super interested in learning more, about the role and kind of what, investors are looking for. And then I'll pass back over to Nuzi again. Can you discuss any specific financial tools or resources that are particularly useful for startups in these life sciences and healthcare sectors?
Yeah, I mean, all of our products are tailored specifically for startups, and we have, a different array of products at every stage. So where AJ and I work at the earliest stages, all of our products are specific, for founders who don't have a lot of capital. There's no minimum, there's no fees, no fees on international or domestic wires. But I think the biggest value in terms of what we bring to SVB and what we've been doing for 40 years is our venture debt. So once you raise your Series A, depending on who your investors are, we can come in with debt, and usually it's around 20 to 30% of the round. So if you're raising a 10 million Series A, we can come in with an additional 20 to or an additional 2 to 3 million. And this helps extend your runway. So a lot of what we have designed for both on the product side and the way we develop our relationships and the value beyond banking is tailored specifically for founders at every stage.
Amazing. And, kind of on that topic of what financial tools or resources that are useful, how does Silicon Valley Bank support life sciences and healthcare startups in managing their capital needs, particularly when scaling their operations? And would love to actually close this out with the both of y'all.
AJ,
excellent. I guess, I guess I'll go first. Well, first of all, we have an infrastructure that's been built over the last 4 decades, not only within startup banking for pre-series A startups, where Nuzi mentioned the whole product suite is set to help you manage your finances at an early stage and then scale with you. We also have an award-winning platform that provides some of the key insights and metrics that you need to track as a startup founder, making it very easy for you to manage that from your dashboard, such as burn rate, run rate, things of that sort. But more importantly, I think in addition to what we could do in what founders are looking for on the financial side of things, capital is one side of it, but relationships are the other. And that's really where we shine. Being a national and formerly global bank, we have a team of bankers, thousands of bankers with extensive networks that we can leverage to get you to the right people at the right time. And where we may not have the proper solution for you or the expertise in a particular area, we're only 1 or 2 degrees away from getting you to somebody who can. And so I would emphasize that most importantly is relationships. And then from that, everything will seem to kind of fall into place from there.
Yeah, and to add to that, a lot of our team is specifically dedicated to healthcare and life science. So we're a small but mighty team, and all of our relationships are in that arena. A lot of us on the business development side don't come from banking. We have Anton, who has a PhD. We have other folks who come from medical device. I come from more of a health tech background and have worked at startups in the health tech space. So, we come from industry. We're not regular bankers. We have a network that we're trying to leverage to help you get to your next milestone.
And it's really important to note too. I mean, it's definitely all the collaborations across the different ecosystem and healthcare sectors all coming together to really just have that one purpose of helping startups get to that next level. And I really appreciate all the great work that y'all are both doing. And thank you so much for taking time out of your extremely busy schedules, I'm sure, to talk to us today. Their LinkedIn information will be in the chat. Please do follow up with both Newsy and AJ if you have any additional questions. And again, thanks so much for your time. And I will pass it back over to Stan.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
That's fantastic, Ansley. And again, great work from the Silicon Valley Bank team. They are phenomenal with startups. We've been working with them for a number of years now. So do look them up, do link in with them. They love getting connected on LinkedIn. And don't forget to sign up for the summit. We've got that coming up December 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. We'll get to meet more cool people like Silicon Valley Bank and others, Bill Toronto, Tahinder Singh, all these good folks. Amy West, of course, and use the discount code that you see here in front of you. Looking forward to seeing you at the Microsoft Tech Center in Times Square. And next up, we've got one last folk that we're looking forward to talking to, Addie Diner from iFocus Health, and looking forward to hearing about this new revolutionary technology that's really at the intersection of AI and healthcare, and looking at their pathway for transforming behavioral health with AI and objective measures there. And really excited to be talking to her and all the good work that she's doing, and looking to hear more about that. Adi, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi.
Hey, outstanding. All right, welcome to the show. And first of all, tell our good audience a little bit about your background and your journey.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be part of this. My background, I'm in my education, I'm a physicist. I worked most of my career developing hardware products, from lasers to biotech and medical devices. When my kid was diagnosed with ADHD, I started looking into that space and learning it more. And I realized there's no objective measures. And when you don't have objective measures, it's much harder to first know who to trust and then to get good care. And that's how the iFocus journey started.
Good for you. And tell us a little bit about the platform.
So we found a way to actually measure a progress for we start from ADHD, but basically it's a cognitive measure. We're using eye tracking from the webcam we're all using every day to look at reading patterns. And using the reading patterns, we are able to measure progress for a patient compared to their baseline. We can give you an objective measure compared to how you did before the treatment. The platform is already active in the patient-facing side, and we're working with design partners to get it into the clinical setting, so clinicians will actually have this information. And instead of spending the time asking the patient, how did you do in the past month, they'll be able to actually see the data where you have the iFocus objective measure as well as a subjective self-report from the patient in real time. So how am I feeling now versus relying on memory, and then make decisions based on data.
It's incredible, absolutely incredible, and very needed. I mean, in our society, we've seen now with the rise of this kind of condition over the last 5 years, number one, with the pandemic, and number two, with the scrolling society that we've seen really grow dramatically. And so tell me a little bit more about how you're partnering with healthcare organizations to enhance the patient outcomes that they're seeing through iFocus's platform deployment.
Yeah, so one thing I think it's important to note, there's an increase in diagnosing, not necessarily in the actual condition. A good way to see that is almost every kid you hear is diagnosed, at least one of the parents has ADHD. But what people are starting to realize is how much of an impact it has. So we talk about mental health crisis, and then you look at the data and you realize that untreated ADHD is a huge risk factor for other mental health conditions. And in my mind, it's sort of a low-hanging fruit. We have a way to treat it, but we're not doing it well enough. And part of the reason is psychiatrists, especially pediatric psychiatrists, are usually very, very well educated about ADHD, but there are not enough of them. So what happens is that pediatricians and PCPs need to do the follow-up care. They are not they don't have the education or the time, frankly, right? They get a few minutes per patient. And how will they know how to, if they ask the patient, how well are you doing? It takes a lot of experience to really assess subjective feedback. And pediatricians don't have the ability, education, or time to do that. So once you have a platform that gives you an objective measure, now it's like lab tests. And they can actually, it's easier to train PCPs and other providers. It's easier to give the treatment. And it's easier to trust it as a patient, because now there's an objective measure. I can see how I'm doing. I can see how my kid is doing. There's less talk about, is this real? Is it not real? We can start treating it like we treat other health conditions. And really, I think the point here is not for the patients, or for the clinicians. I think solutions should work for everyone in the space. And that's where we're addressing here.
It's fantastic. No, good for you. And again, this is so spot on in terms of what we need. We've got about 5 minutes left. And I think one of the things that we're always looking at the lab with our research is we're trying to understand patient-facing products. And, again, you're seeing a lot of this now, obviously, with iFocus. You can't get more patient-facing than this. But what's next for iFocus when it comes to this? And what are some of your short and long-term goals and in terms of what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, so as I said, as I mentioned, we started with a patient-facing platform because it was important for us for this to be easy to use. Otherwise, patients won't use it. We're saying this is one of the only products designed by people with ADHD for people with ADHD.
Yeah.
Now that we have over 600 active patients who are working with clinicians to develop their side of it, I heard from many clinicians that a lot of the new technologies implemented were not developed by people that understand their needs. So we want to work with them, and we're actively looking for additional partners that are interested to use this platform and give us feedback. That's where we are right now. So once we launch it and we have it embedded in the EHRs, it gives them the most value, and it's easy for them to use as well.
It's fantastic. And just to wrap it up here, what kind of advice would you give to other entrepreneurs, obviously, in particular women in tech who are just starting out in the healthcare space, and they're trying to figure out how to build a company, build a product, and build some sort of market development?
So I think it's important to understand that we hear a lot about tech startups, and what's a significant difference is if you develop a SaaS, a Zoom, a Slack, all these, the people that develop them are also the users and the investors. That's the same group. It's a tech group. For health, the fact that someone that is a tech person wants to pay out of pocket doesn't mean that's necessarily going to be a successful product. So you really need to understand the markets and needs of the market, and that the early adopters in this space are not necessarily a good indication of what will succeed in the end. And I think it's important to do that discovery before you spend a lot of time and energy to make sure your product addresses the real needs of the health system.
That's right. No, it's fantastic advice, and a really good way to be able to make sure that there's real value being contributed to the ecosystem when that's working. And you talked a little bit about eye tracking, and you talked a little bit about building outcomes. How does the use of AI with iFocus and its platform actually contribute to improving patient outcomes and reducing costs for hospitals and health systems?
So what we're doing is since we're not psychiatrists, we used AI to basically show it how people read when they're not treated and then with treatment. And we get the measure of the difference, which is, if you want, top down, because bottom up, understanding the brain and how it works. I know many great researchers are working on it, but it takes a lot of time. Our approach is really, really practical, looking at reading, but it's complex. It's too complex to do this type of thing without AI. And that's where AI is a tool in this.
Okay, so that makes a ton of sense. And again, we've tested a lot of different platforms that are using AI to improve direct-to-patient conditions, whether it's in speech or whether it's in rehab or whether it's in cardio. And so That's impressive. What is your platform built on? What's the tech stack in terms of either Python or C++ or that sort of technology?
So here you got me. Although I have a PhD in physics, I'm not a tech. I'm not the person writing code in my company. I have two co-founders, and they're the ones that can answer that question. It's web-based, so the product is on the web and actively working, but I can't answer that intelligently. So sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's no doubt there. And again, your team is just phenomenal. We're so impressed with what you have done. It's 3 female founders for those in our audience who are not familiar with the company, and really just some incredible successes in the last year, especially. Tell us a little bit about how you guys have been able to tackle such an important area around ADHD, and how you've been able to build this kind of a technology platform and do this all from the ground up. What's been your secret?
I think it's about really believing in what we do. That's the first thing. And what happened is we started talking to clinicians, and we found, and initially I was asking, what am I doing wrong? No, it can't be this easy. And we got some amazing support from many clinicians. And I think when you're passionate about what you do and you really believe in it, you get people to join you and support you. And that's been a huge thing. Working on this collaboratively and getting feedback, and that's how we improve the product.
That's great. And that's such a good way to finish off today, since so much of today was around being able to get feedback from people like yourself and investors and buyers, and in terms of how to build an ecosystem. And again, we've had a tremendous audience as well listening to you today, from government executives to academic executives to academics, researchers from all over the world: Africa, Asia, Latin America, North America, Europe, of course. So thank you for your time today, your perspectives, and just lending us a little bit of your expertise.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I've been enjoying working with HITLAB, so thank you very much.
Fantastic. All right. And what a great way to end a phenomenal August, when you can't find a better representative and a better representation of venture and innovation in healthcare and life sciences. So again, just thank you to everyone on the HITLAB team, from Rachel, Yamina, Ansley, Raymond, Pallavi, Melissa, Jerry, Naomi, Sammy, Nico. Just everybody's such a great team in putting this program together. Can't thank them enough. And we have so much going on, again, from the speakers today, like Vouch and X-Ray and Mercury and Silicon Valley Bank, and all of the great sponsors, Carta DeLuca, everybody who sponsored here is just really, really appreciated. We appreciate your participation, your contributions to digital health and patient health, not only in the United States, but also around the world. And again, we've got the Digital Health Symposium coming up in September. And so look forward to that. Don't forget to talk about and sign up for the Digital Health Symposium in September, and connect with me on LinkedIn. We love new ideas. Obviously, the bigger the idea, the better for us, the better for patients around the world, as we're trying to make sure that the technology that we're using today is going to be used by everybody in the world tomorrow, from the highest income 1 billion to the lowest income 1 billion. So LinkedIn, message me, and let's keep talking. And don't forget to sign up again for September's symposium. We're going to be talking about tech trends and the frontier of health tech and wearables, AI, and other aspects of that, with Genentech, Hexaskin, Pfizer, Garmin, all doing tremendous presentations, really making a difference in what they're doing. And we're looking forward to hearing from them and sharing it with you. And so on that note, we've also got every Wednesday, something called Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. I'm hoping you know about this. If you don't, my bad, and we'll get better at that. But it is a phenomenal program, again, put together by the HITLAB Executive Education and Events Group, and they are extremely excited about this coming semester. So do pay attention, do sign up, and learn from people like whom you heard from today, and others about how digital is being adopted in the most optimal way possible through the development and the actual purchasing and investing, all the way through the patient engagement. And the Innovator Summits, of course, you all know about that. It's our annual or biannual or semi-annual event coming up at the end of the semester, December 2, 3, and 4 at the Microsoft Tech Center in New York City, Times Square. Looking forward to seeing you all there. And again, thank you all for joining us today. Have a great rest of your summer, and we will see you at the end of September at the HITLAB Symposium, and we'll talk to you then. Take care, everybody.